and again remind members to ensure that the volume on all tablet devices is off with function and F8. And we're in public session, and could I remind members of their obligation to declare any relevant financial or other interests in relation to today's business, and remind members and those in the public gallery to switch off mobile phones as they may interfere with the sound recording system, and the meeting will be on camera. There's an apology in from David Hilditch, who has to go to a funeral. Is Karen?
Karen?
I don't know. I didn't hear.
Okay. We have the draft minutes of the meeting of Thursday, the 22nd of October, and they are at page 5. Would members agree that these minutes are an accurate record of this meeting?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Good. Chairperson's business, again, to remind members that the ministerial briefing on the progress of the BBC Charter renewal process has been rescheduled from today to Tuesday the 17th of November at 12:30 in the Senate chamber, with the agreement of the Minister, and that's simply because of the amount of business we have today and constraints of time. It will also allow members, in fact, to focus exclusively on that issue on the 17th.
12:30.
12:30 Senate chamber on the 17th. Now, the first substantial item on the agenda then is a briefing from the Arts Council of Northern Ireland about further in-year budget cuts to the arts sector organisations. We've had information about that in various forms over the last number of weeks, but it's important that we get it straight from the Arts Council themselves as the arm's-length body that has a remit for the arts. And we have with us four folk from the Arts Council: Chief Executive Roisin McDonagh, the Director of Arts Development Noreen McKinney, the Arts Development Officer Maria McAllister, and the Capital Projects Manager Lorraine Calderwood. You're very welcome along today. You'll find, members, in your documents point 3.1, which is the Clerk's memo. It's at page 11. Then point 3.2, Arts Council of Northern Ireland information on forward work programme. It is at page 14. 3.3, audit of the traditional music sector in Northern Ireland, page 16. We'd asked for that. And then point 4, a list of the 32 arts sector organisations affected by the further in-year cuts. So, if you would like to proceed with your opening statement. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting us to the committee this morning. I know that when you first wrote, you wanted us principally to focus on elements of our annual work plan, and we are, of course, equipped and with staff here to do so. And I hope very much that the forward work plan hasn't been superseded by the current context, but I wanted to say a few words about that and to give the committee a sense of the achievements of the arts sector drawn from some of our research which relates to the year 14-15. To say that when we fund arts organisations, we ask them to fill in the annual funding survey, which captures information about their level of activity and other indicators, and it's that to which I'm referring at the moment. So in 14-15, which is the latest survey information that we have, 112 organisations were funded, and they received around about 13.5 million, and that was drawn from both Exchequer and lottery funds, and that's all year round funding. There were a total of about 6,000 people almost employed on either a permanent or a contract basis, and by which I mean full and part-time, of which nearly 1,000 were employed on a permanent basis, and the remaining roughly 5,000 people were employed on a contract basis. So that'll give you an idea, broadly speaking, of the size and scale of the sector. There were over 3,500 volunteers who contributed 85,000 hours of support to these funded organisations. And based on the investment that we made through our Exchequer and lottery funding, An additional £34.5 million was generated from other sources, including almost £19 million of earned income, including £12.5 million from other public sources and over £3 million from trusts and foundations. I also wanted to advise the committee that box office income, which is, as you know, very important to many of our arts organisations, represented over half of earned income, round about £10 million. So how many people actually attended or participated in the arts in terms of all the work that was delivered by our arts organisations in 14-15? Well, the report tells us that there was over 4.1 million people who came along to either participate or attend the arts in 14-15. Now, we caveat that figure with some caution because it includes both estimated and known audiences, and it is reported by our arts organisations themselves. So, as you know, our arts organisations work in a wide variety of settings, in hospitals and communities, as well as in the more traditional venues, theatres, galleries and so on. They work across a diverse range of activities in the field of community development, youth work, disability, education and training, healthcare, and so on. I suppose a couple of other final important statistics are that when we talk about our arts organisations, they have hardwired into their DNA outreach activity. So when we look at education and outreach work, as it's called, or work on an outreach basis, almost half of them, as in 49%, delivered work away from their home base, and I think that's a very significant figure. And of that, half, almost a further half, was delivered within the 20% most deprived super output areas in Northern Ireland. So I think that, as I said, our arts organisations are very conscious of their obligations and in terms of delivering their work in our most disadvantaged communities, and do so freely and have done so for very many years. So that really is my initial opening statement. You can imagine, therefore, in that context, that the Board of the Arts Council was dismayed to learn that not only did we have an 11% cut, which at the start of the year, and again, I think understandable, perhaps in the context of the economic climate that we're all facing in Northern Ireland, that a cut was administered at the beginning of the year. But when we faced a situation later in the year, last month, of having to administer a further cut, we found this quite a challenge, as you would expect, because it's always harder to make savings more than halfway through the year than it is at the start of the year, when at least you have an opportunity to plan for them. The basis upon which we made our cuts at the start of the year were in terms of our strategy and indeed our published criteria, which took into account wider considerations about the need to ensure that there was a balanced art portfolio right across the art forms and with geographic spread in Northern Ireland, and that was the basis upon which the Board of the Arts Council took the decisions. Having made that strategic set of decisions at the start of the year, the only basis which the Board of the Arts Council felt it could administer the in-year cuts was on an equal basis, and that's what they did. They cut, the proposal is to cut 7% right across each and every organisation. It felt that that was the most equitable way of approaching, because we had no other information upon which to take those decisions. So, Chair, that's just my opening remarks. I know that you will also want to hear on other topics, so I'll be guided by you in terms of when you want to hear the remarks from others, or whether you want to pause now.
Okay. Could I just ask, the 8% in-year cut is obviously of particular concern because it's in-year, and therefore over 6 months it's actually double that, really. If it's 7% passed on, it's really a 14% cut for those 6 months. That's pretty unusual to get a cut of that extent in year. Can you recall that happening recently?
Well, in the preceding year, the year to which I refer here in terms of our annual funding survey in 14-15, we also had an in-year cut that year, which was of the magnitude, I think, of 4.4%.
Right.
We always retain the final balance of grant from our arts organisations of 5%, which we only ever pay out in the ensuing financial year, contingent upon the delivery of a report of the activity that took place in the year in which the award was allocated. So we always have a mechanism, if needed, by retaining that 5% balance, which is, we were in the position where we could do that. In the heels of the hunt, so to speak, we were able to absorb ourselves as much, the 4.4% cut, and not pass it on to our organisations, for the very reason that you just stated, that it is extraordinarily hard once you have planned and committed and frequently legally engaged or contracted with artists or events or exhibitions or whatever, to put those on, then to switch tack at such a late stage. So to varying degrees, arts organisations will find that difficult.
And in the original or initial letter of offer to these organisations, is there anything in there that is a binding commitment to actually pay the amount that is in the letter of offer? I'm not clear on the legal position about that, or how that's dealt with.
Our letter of offer states really that, subject to the Arts Council's own funding position, we will then meet the award. We'll be able to, in a position to allocate the resource to the award that is stipulated in the letter of offer. So we have that clause that says, subject to receipt of our own level of funding, we'll make the award on that basis.
Thank you. Gordon Dunn.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much, ladies, for coming in today and making a presentation. I think we're all sympathetic to the concerns that you have in relation to funding. The Ulster Orchestra, obviously, is one of the areas that it will be hit significantly, and we're all very much aware of the good work that has been done by the Ulster Orchestra in trying to restructure how they manage their business, and we're all supportive of that. But how do you see these cuts further affecting the good work of the Ulster Orchestra?
I mean, I think the orchestra, like all our arts organisations, faced with this additional in-year cut, will struggle. I think the boards of our arts organisations will now find themselves in a position where they will have to make an assessment with respect to their governance role as to whether and to what extent they can continue with their planned programme of activity. They will face a situation where they may decide that they can afford to carry a deficit in year, or perhaps not. Many won't be in a position to carry a deficit. Others may have some reserves, but mostly they don't. Our arts organisations do not have reserves to see them through the rainy day scenario. The orchestra is no different in that regard. Others will be facing the issue of whether they need to cut back on their programming, or whether they need to let staff go, or whether they can, in fact, continue with the level of outreach and social engagement activity that they currently do. So the orchestra, I'm sure, is facing all of those issues as it endeavours to sustain itself into the future, and the board will be making, I'm sure, judgments around each of those issues.
Okay. But my other question, just in relation to the MAC, we have had several discussions here about the ongoing works and the issues about liability. What is the latest in relation to that, about the liability of the works that need to be done to rectify the failures there has been in the facade of the building?
Well, Lorraine Calderwood is our capital projects management person in the Arts Council, but on the issue of legal liability, that is something that the board of the MAC have procured legal advice as to where the liability resides for the problems that are facing the facade of the MAC. And that is going to be, I think, complicated by the number of parties that may have a bearing and may have some responsibility for the current situation. That may take some time before it becomes clear. But in the interim, the board of the MAC, along with support from both the department and the Arts Council, are dealing with the immediate health and safety issues through very prudent measures, which I know Lorraine, if members are interested, will have the detail of.
Yeah, I understand from the information we've been given there, it's down as one of the inescapable pressures, 150k, plus other health and safety issues that have had to be addressed. We've been told here that 150,000 have gone towards the provision for unforeseen costs in relation to the MAC facade. Have we any further detail on that?
To date, I suppose there's been about 16 months' work now being done at rectifying the situation. So initially it was detailed reports, structural reports, looking at the stone, any of the fractures were removed. Netting has been put up for health and safety and public safety around the square area. We're now looking at moving forward to a more permanent solution. So again, there's been further reports having to be looking at options appraisals, and so we're now at the stage where we can put up scaffolding, and then we're putting together a business case for the preferred option, which is complete removal of the facade and replacement with another stone.
Okay, and the cost of that at the moment is has that been
The option.
the cost, and obviously it's been covered by the department. Is that right?
To date, there has been some of the money covering has been MAC's own money. Some of it has been our Arts Council retention monies from the main contract. And for the permanent work, we're looking at putting together a business case, and it's looking to be around 600,000.
Okay, and just the issue of the liability then is still ongoing.
It is.
It's a relatively new building, and I think obviously we would all feel that there's a liability with the builder, the contractors, obviously, and the consultants who were involved in it. So that's still to be followed through. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's going to be left with the solicitors, and the contracts are being looked at the moment. The design elements of the building is being looked at. That's part of what the reports are all about as well, where the failure has been and who did the design element of those. So the solicitors are looking at all of those aspects at the moment, and then it will go to court if there can't be an agreement.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. Thank you very much for your attendance, your evidence here. Can I just ask, in relation to the Arts Council, what is the role of the Arts Council in Northern Ireland in terms of your remit?
Well, we're clearly an arm's length body set up to promote and encourage participation in the arts. And we're there to advise and support government policy for the arts, and we're also there to advise local authorities on their strategies for the arts. So we have, in addition to that, we have a developmental function in terms of developing the relevant art form areas right across the spectrum.
Okay. So, as an arm's length body within the DCAL family, can I ask you, what input does the Arts Council for Northern Ireland have, for example, in the cultural programme? Department's cultural programme.
We haven't had any input in the department's cultural programme, if you mean by its construction. No, we haven't.
Okay. Is that not incredible? That the department haven't asked the Arts Council, its arm's length body, which has a responsibility for the development of the arts, take the lead in the arts in Northern Ireland, provide so much funding when you have it. Is it not incredible that you wouldn't be included in the cultural programme?
I mean, I think in an ideal world, yes, we would have wished to have had dialogue and engagement from an early stage in terms of the development of a wider cultural programme.
Yeah, it's just, we got some figures last week and I interrogated some of those with civil servants from the department. And if I might then ask, in terms of the Community Festivals Fund, which according to its references, it's about changing the quality of life through participation and engagement in culture, arts and leisure. Again, something you would have thought that the Arts Council would have been involved in. Are you involved in that?
We're not involved in the Community Festivals Fund, which was established, I think, quite a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And that was an initiative by the department, which I think broadly we welcomed, that engaged to give money to local authorities in order to stimulate community involvement in festivals. And festivals can be much broader than arts festivals, and I think that has been the experience in many local authority areas. So we were aware of that, and I think it certainly is something that complemented our work in supporting broader arts festivals.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just in terms of the cultural programme that I mentioned at the start. You'll be aware that £350,000 was given to the West Belfast Festival in 2014-15, and I think 254,000 the year before. And the Arts Council is not involved in that at all. I find that incredible. Could I just ask then, in terms of the cultural programme, according to figures that I have in front of me, there was, in 2013-14, £250,000 given to Field and Fubble, £115,000 given to the McCracken Cultural Society, £110,000 to the Belfast Film Festival, and in 2014-15, 200,000 to Field and Fubble, 35 to Arts Extra, 35 to the Spectrum Centre, and 35 to the Film Festival, and continuing on down. When I look at that, and that money, there's other monies there that are being divided, and the lead in that is the West Belfast Festival that's involved in then giving money out to other funders, so other participants. Do you have a concern, Ms McDonagh, that the Arts Council is being ignored or circumvented here, and that money is going from the department to, for example, West Belfast Festival, to give money out as a funder and I mean, is that potentially undermining the Arts Council?
I think on a broader point, the board of the Arts Council, when it met, when our chair met with the minister, did make the point that our role is to advise and to support the development of the arts, and the principal manner in which we do this is through our grant funding programmes. And we have experience in terms of grant management over many years, and that we are always open and willing to engage with the department in terms of the deployment of resources and ensure that due process is present in the handling of all grants, and that indeed some of the organisations that you refer to have already received funding from the Arts Council, and so we are very au fait with them and their work.
I was coming to that because a number of these things we are seeing money coming going directly to some of these organisations from yourselves. Can I then ask, just in terms of marching bands, because I've written to the Minister recently about marching bands. You started off in 2012-13, and I very much value that money, and great work has been done, and credit to the Council for that. But that was cut down to £104,000 in 14-15. That's now gone.
Correct.
And we'll come to the inescapable pressures that the Minister has in our budget and the allocation of monies in that. I mean, what are the prospects from the Arts Council's perspective of that money being reinstated? Because it does a huge amount of work. I've received a number of pieces of correspondence about it and been lobbied by a number of groups. And as I've said, I met the Orange Order about it last week. I met the Bands Fraternity about it. I met the Ulster Scots Community Network about it. And this money is cut, gone. I mean, it halved in 2 years anyway, but now it's gone. What's the prospect of it coming back?
I think it's very hard to say, but the Arts Council has supported the band sector over many years.
Yes.
And we view it as an important element of our work and something that, you know, has arisen, I think, in the context of the traditional arts audit, for example, but obviously is much bigger than that. And it is something that we would like to be, that we wish to work with the Minister in order to try and get some further resources on down the line to continue to support the band sector. Best that we get it at the start of the year, because there's always difficulties in long lead-in times, often for the construction or the making, the fabrication of instruments, their purchase and their collection. So we would like to see it at the beginning of a financial year.
I think I'm being told my time's up, but I welcome that assurance and thank you very much for your answers.
Okay, Dominic Brandley.
Thanks very much. Good morning. Could you give us an idea of how the in-year cuts, the latest ones, have impacted on your annual work plan?
Well, I mean, our annual work plan is determined by a number of elements, including, as you rightly say, the amount of resources that were allocated. As an organisation, I think we have spent a great deal of time and energy in engaging with the arts sector to hear from them not only about their work but about the impact that the cuts will have on their work. And we did a lot of that in the months of June, July and through the summer. And what the arts organisations told us is, I think what I've already said, is that there will be fewer performances and exhibitions. There will be a loss in terms of education and outreach work, and there will be a contraction in terms of the number of jobs and indeed artists that can be supported as a consequence of all of that. We currently have new premises. Just to let the committee know, we are now located at the sidings in Lisburn as part of the government's estate management strategy, which asked us to divest ourselves of a lease and also to be seen as an efficiency saving. We have members of staff going out on the voluntary exit scheme in the first tranche, and we have a number of applications to exit under the next phase of the scheme. So all that painting a picture, really, in a sense, Chairman, of an organisation that, like many others across Northern Ireland, is contracting, is trying to deliver efficiency savings, but also one which is endeavouring to continue to maintain a very strong and open relationship with the arts sector, which we believe we've had for a considerable period.
Okay. In terms of your aims, objectives, goals, how will these cuts impact on you?
Well, one of the things that we have been saying to arts organisations over the last period, and in particular over the last 3 to 6 months, is if they survive, they will be doing extraordinarily well under the current circumstances. You know, that really is, that will be the prize, in my personal belief, over the next number of years, if the arts organisations manage to endure the current difficulties in terms of funding and manage to come out of that, albeit on a reduced or slimmed down scale, they would have done extraordinarily well. We have also put in, and we're developing a programme to help organisations transform their business model. I think that's going to be limited in scale, and I think we've got to be realistic about what might be achieved there, but it may help some organisations. And we're also putting in place a business support programme in order to get them to, you know, if they if there's a particular legal or technical or financial issue that they need to deal with, that they have the requisite advice that enables them, in terms of their governance, to take the appropriate decisions. So we're trying to put in place interventions that will help them weather this particular crisis, and or indeed if they need to wind down, that they do so in an orderly and proper manner.
Okay. The audit of the traditional arts, why did you carry that out, and what were the outcomes from it?
I'll pass you to Maria McAllister, our
Good
officer.
morning. Good morning. The need for the audit was initially outlined through the Arts Council's music strategy in 2011, which described the traditional arts sector as a resourceful and very popular sector, but an under-resourced sector. Arts Council at that point committed to a long-term programme of development, starting with an audit to gain a deeper understanding of the sector and to identify areas where support was most needed. We also committed at that stage to establish a traditional music forum. Following a tender process, Dermot McLaughlin from Creative Strategic Solutions was commissioned to explore 11 areas within the traditional music sector. And over a 6-month period, he consulted with over 100 individuals, over 50 publications, and received 156 questionnaires in response to an education questionnaire that had been sent to organisations, schools throughout Northern Ireland. The key findings include some staggering results, really. 5,295 participants are taking part in weekly traditional music lessons on a weekly basis, and 70% of those are aged between 4 and 24. There's 452 classes taking place with over 400 traditional music teachers across the north. And 81% of people are paying less than £4 to access traditional music tuition at this point. There's at least 30 instrument makers in Northern Ireland. It's known to have to be more like 35 instrument makers at this stage. And some of the key areas that were outlined by Dermot McLaughlin through his recommendations include meeting the demand for lessons, meeting the demand for instruments, providing training for music tutors, and to work in partnership with the Education Authority to build a coordinated approach to provision, and to build teaching aids and training for teachers in schools. Some of the other key areas include supporting the sector to enhance their collaborations and their partnerships. And we've established the Traditional Music Forum at this stage, the third meeting of which takes place next week. And I think the support for that forum demonstrates how eager the sector are to develop and to be very proactive in bringing the recommendations to creating a situation which sees development within the modest budget that we have at this stage.
Okay. Thank you very much.
It might be useful at some point, maybe after a meeting someday, if Maria and Dermot could come up and do a presentation about that, maybe an informal one rather than actually in a meeting, if you're agreeable to that. Okay, thank you. Catherine O'Washington.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation there. Roisin, you touched on it there in terms of the what guidance in terms of sustainability was given to any of the arts organisations, to look at some sort of medium to long term programme to get by this period at the moment, testing period.
Yes, what we said to them is that I suppose they really need to have a 360-degree look at how they do their business and what their needs are. So whether that's either maybe merging with another organisation that is comparable to you and trying to get some savings, as they call them, back office savings, whether it's through the sharing of other types of resources, which actually does go on quite a lot in the arts sector, and particularly amongst the drama sector, we were advised very recently. Or whether it is looking at charging for your services, but obviously that has a negative effect on perhaps people who can't afford to pay for them. And our arts organisations are very convicted around the principle of equal and open access to the arts. And the money that they get in terms of public investment often acts as subvention, so it reduces the price of tickets if they can, if they are a box office organisation. Through to really just reducing the size and scale of their operation. And those are difficult decisions that each and every individual arts organisation will have to, and their boards will have to make. However, if there are, as I said, other forms of support that we can give, there is a programme there, and we will give them access to a small pot of money which will look at perhaps helping them transform how they do their business. And it's not up to us in that sense to direct them and to tell them how to go about that, because they know their business best. But as I said earlier, I suspect that that will not protect all of our arts organisations in the current circumstances. It may well help some.
Okay. And I'm sure you're aware that quite a number of organisations were here at Parliament Buildings on Tuesday, and I was talking to quite a number of them, and there was a certain uncertainty about how the criteria would be applied to different organisations in terms of whatever cutbacks or whatever may have to. What criteria was applied?
Well, as I said at the beginning, when we took our decisions on 15-16, we were very clear and made very explicit in terms of our funding guidance, how and on what basis we would take those decisions. When we came to administer the in-year cut, the board felt we had no other basis and no other information other than to say that that cut would have to be universally applied across the board to the 32 funded organisations, and that's what they did. For the coming year, again, we're about to open our annual funding programme, I think in the course of next week, actually, and our board has met to revisit the criteria that it's going to be using for the coming year, and suffice to say, it hasn't substantially altered in terms of the approach that it adopted last year, and we will be going forward on that basis, taking strategic decisions, trying to avoid duplication, ensuring there is as much as possible geographic access to the arts, and that each art form area has some integrity, that the core of each art form is able to be sustained.
Okay, and as we head towards the end of the financial year, this 5% contingency hedge fund or whatever, that's still in, is as in place.
It is, and arts organisations to varying degrees will be facing cash pressures. Now in November, they'll be wanting to draw down the balance of their in-year funding, and we have written to them to say you will be getting of the remaining balance that you would normally have drawn down, which would have been 20%, because we always keep back the 5 at the end of the year. We will be releasing 13% at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just ask, the 32 organisations, I'm just looking at this there, there's a couple I don't recognise. Maybe you wouldn't have the information, should I? Happy Days EIBF, what's EIBF?
Oh, sorry, that's in Enniskillen International Beckett Festival.
Right.
Apologies. So
thank you. And CCA Derry Londonderry.
Oh, that's the Centre for Contemporary Arts. It's an art gallery.
All right, that's grand. Thank you. Rosie McCorley.
Gormai Agri Caherley, and thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. And I mean, of course, I have sympathy, like everybody else, for what has happened, and it's in the current context, and I know we understand it, but it's not easy. But the other day, after the Minister took questions, she met with yourselves. Did you? Can you talk about what was said at that meeting, or what way the Minister conducted it?
I think the board, we very much appreciated, there was my chair and 3 board members and myself went to meet the Minister, and we very much appreciated that she responded to our request for that meeting. She said she wanted an open and honest discussion of the issues, and we did have an exchange around what had happened. I think, whilst both parties, I think, appreciated the honesty and integrity of the conversation, and we did make quite a few points, some of which the committee has raised here today, to the Minister, and she listened intently and said that fundamentally it was her prerogative to make the decisions that she did, and of course we respect that. And we said that to her. We did, however, make the point that if it would have been better had it been done at the beginning of the year, so that there would have been clarity around the budgetary position. And of course, it is every minister's prerogative to establish strategic priorities for funding. That's a fundamental point. But if it's done at the beginning of the year, I think it gives greater clarity, greater engagement, and then we can manage accordingly with the resources that we have with certainty, and I think that helps the arts organisations as well.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And apologies for being late for the meeting, so I know I missed some of the presentation at the beginning. But in terms of the 32 organisations, would any of those organisations be in danger now of going out of business?
It's very hard to say, because I think, you know, as we are meeting here, I'm sure that the boards of arts organisations, in light of what it is they know about their funding situation, will be meeting to discuss what approach they need to take, what it is they need to stop doing, what it is they will have to try and do differently. And each individual organisation will face its own particular pressures, so it's very hard to say. What we do know, as I said, is the overall aggregate picture in terms of when we wrote to our arts organisations at the end of July. They responded to us in August and told us what actually a cut, an in-year cut, would mean to them. And it is in the very areas that I've already outlined: jobs, education, outreach and programme.
Okay, can I ask you too about the cultural programme? There has been a lot of commentary around it and criticism of the fact that of the organisations who were given the funding to deliver or to coordinate the activities that would make up the cultural programme. Do you have any knowledge of what was delivered, or the let's say the quality of the programmes that were delivered for the cultural programme?
And certainly some of the organisations that have been funded through the cultural programme, as I said, are familiar to us, and clearly we support them. We think they are very good organisations, otherwise we would not be funding them. So, you know, are we aware of the level of activity that they, and the type of programme that they've put on? Of course we would be, because that would be in our general purview of and our working knowledge of them as an organisation. So when we come to meet with them, and we meet with them on a regular basis, and indeed with our forthcoming funding programme coming up, suffice to say that arts organisations only report on our funding to us. They don't necessarily report on everybody else's funding, because they will have their own reporting lines and requirements to other funders. So we would know in a broad sense, because our officers are out and about, but we would know in a particular sense as to where our money went and for what purposes.
Okay, and have you said you've got good relationships with those organisations because you work with them, and are you content with the quality of their work in terms of what you fund them for?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We are,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, because we have heard criticism, but what I am told is that it was a very much cross-community delivery of programmes, and open to organisations from like across the north to gain from that funding. So it sounded to me like it did reach a very wide spread of organisations, and it did I think very importantly it reached organisations on the ground that maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity, because I know it reached projects on the Schenkel Road which were very grateful for the opportunity to be able to avail of it. So, I mean, I'm sure you'd agree that would be in keeping with the whole ethos of the what the departmental priorities are in terms of target and need and all of that.
Yes, and I think it's important to say that, you know, as an Arts Council, we are very proud of our arts organisations in terms of the range of activity with which they're engaged right across all our communities in Northern Ireland. And as I said earlier, it is hardwired into their very being that they engage in local communities with people who may not have had the opportunity to access the arts before, and there is a stunning array of work. And in fact, that's something that we did talk to the Minister about, and we were able to present her with a lot of case studies drawn from all our arts organisations in terms of the type and range of activity that they are routinely delivering. So I just wanted to say that and to commend our arts sector for the very high level of engagement that they undertake in this hugely valuable area.
Okay, thank you. Leslie Crean.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. I'd like to ask you perhaps an over picture sort of situation of how you work with the department. Do you have regular liaison with them? Do you have regular meetings? Do you have pre-budget meetings? Do you have post-budget meetings? How did you find out about the cuts?
Yes, we do have regular meetings with the department. We have 2 accountability meetings a year, which are the more formal meetings where we discuss clearly a whole range of routine matters, as is common with all arm's length bodies. And in between, we have regular engagement with officials. And for example, the current Permanent Secretary has established a strategic forum looking at issues within the department as it moves and transitions to a new department for communities. And so that's been at the level of the chief executives and the chair of the board. We've also had meetings where, as a collective entity, we've been setting out very much the positive stall of the Decal family and what it delivers for the citizens of Northern Ireland, which is, for such a tiny department, actually has a massive kind of footprint right across. So in terms of engagement with officials, it would be fairly routine through to supporting requests that come from them for information that needs to be fed to committee or to the Minister or wherever for MLA question time in the Assembly. So we have an ongoing relationship with the department, and one which we value. It's very important that an arm's length body has a strong and healthy, constructive and open relationship, I think, with its parent department, and that's one that we endeavour to ensure, at least on our part, as best we can, that is the case.
Well, at those meetings, would you be asked questions like, what do you see in your budget really that would be inescapable, absolutely essential? Any sort of priority structure at all?
I suppose the way that we function as an arm's length body is that at the beginning of the financial year, when we have certainty around our budget, that's when we that's when we deploy our budget in terms of our annual funding programme. So, for instance, this year we gave out £8.8 million to the 32 funded organisations. There are others that get money from us for annual funding through our lottery-funded programme. But so we set a budget, we strike a budget based on our own budget, and we deploy that. And if we're asked, are there inescapable pressures, I suppose the area that we would be regarded as being in is discretionary spend, because grants are considered by the department as discretionary, whereas I know other aspects of the department's work are considered as perhaps inescapable in their libraries, their buildings and their staff. I think from our perspective, that is actually quite a difficult concept, because we would also argue that our arts organisations have buildings and staff and activities that require support and funding and a degree of certainty. So it's always best to know at the beginning of the financial year, and that's what we like to be able to say to our arts organisations. In fact, we were in a position a number of years ago where we gave them 3-year planning figures, and that's a much healthier position to be in.
And just finally then, are you consulting about in-year monitoring, which we hear quite a bit about, though not much action on it? And particularly the comprehensive spending review, which is now imminent. Have you had discussions about that and how it's going to affect the Arts Council?
We are asked for in-year monitoring bids, and we're also asked if we have any easements. We never have easements, I have to say, but we are asked by our department for in-year monitoring bids, and we have currently prepared one, and we did speak to the Minister, going back to a point that you made previously, as to whether it would be possible to at least mitigate some of the effects of this £870,000 in-year cut, and to reduce the burden on arts organisations, if not alleviate it altogether through a monitoring round bid. Clearly that's going to be contingent on the current political developments and the contacts at the talks. With reference to the comprehensive spending review, we have not yet been asked, because I don't know how far advanced the planning is within government. My understanding is there will be a 1-year settlement, and then in the course of the coming year we will be preparing for the 3-year CSR in the context of a new department, which I think relates back to an earlier point about planning for the transition into a new department, setting out the stall of culture, arts and leisure within the new department, and wanting to kind of position that valuable work to ensure that in the next CSR there is a reasonable resource allocation and a fair and equitable one made for this area of work, including the arts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cameron Kelly.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thanks very much. I apologise for missing your presentation. I got held up this morning. And a lot has been discussed before, and I think Mr. Cree made a made a valuable point, but I don't think actually maybe missed part of his question. He said, how was your organisation informed of the cuts? And I think why he was asking this, I think you'll find that this committee didn't know that the in-year cuts were coming, and we learnt, well, I learnt as a member through the media, and I'm sure the rest did as well. And if that's already been touched on previous to me coming in, I apologise, but I think it's a very important point that I would like to raise, on particularly through an arm's length body, to give this committee an idea on how you were informed. Will maybe make us feel a wee bit more comfortable with how we were informed, because I don't sit comfortable with it at the minute.
We were informed through a letter from the Permanent Secretary, and that would have been in, I'm sorry, I just can't remember the date of the letter, but it came in the form of a letter.
Okay, and I'm sure it came as a shock.
It did come as a shock.
Okay, so you talked about opening up of the new programmes and planning for the years ahead, and how duplication and going through applications, you're going to try and pull that together. Can I ask, are you, the 32 organisations that are now effectively in crisis, really, because of these cuts, what information and guidance is the Arts Council giving those organisations? Are you just going through the programmes that are at risk of not being finished or delivered on it for this year, to see what duplication, and can we join up groups together in order to be able to deliver the importance of those programmes? Is that happening, or are we just at a thing where we're going to put a red line through it because there's no money?
No. Actually, at the risk of repeating myself, I don't have Noreen, maybe you don't mind through the chair to answer that question.
Thank you.
Indeed, even in advance of the formal notification through the department of the in-year cut, because of our experience last year, we were trying to prepare for the same outcome possibly, and we held a series of sector meetings with the arts organisations over the summer where we talked to them exactly about those issues, and we also brought in some expert help in facilitating those sessions through some associate advisors with SIB who were very, very helpful. They did an analysis for us of the spend in the arts over the past 5 years and looked at trends, box office, other earned income, etc. So we were able to set that in a context. And then looking at, obviously, the decrease in government funding that we're facing and have faced over the past 5 years in particular. And we had very in-depth discussions looking at other models, talking to those organisations about the potential for sharing back office services, creative hubs, other ways to organise maybe some of those core costs that they all share, because if we're facing into a future perhaps where not every arts organisation can have its own, albeit very lean administration, I have to say, and as you know, the arts sector does rely very heavily on volunteering, and it's a model actually in terms of volunteer activity, but they do all have skeleton administrations, and even looking at those skeleton administrations, can we continue to support those? So we've been very much urging them to look at that, and as Roisin mentioned, in our applications for annual funding, which will open next year, we have a strand which is looking at sustainability to help organisations to try and do that, and we've been actively encouraging them to come in with collaborative bids to try and take forward some of those very pragmatic initiatives where they might share. And we're also going to have to look very hard, which we did last year, at any perceived duplication of service. Not that there is any, because I know the committee will be aware in Northern Ireland we tend to have one of everything. We do have a number of theatre companies. I'm not singling them out in any way, but we've one orchestra, we've one opera company, we've one producing theatre. We've a number of independent galleries and theatre companies, and we wouldn't say that any of those services are duplicated, but where, for example, Arts and Disability Forum last year came together with ADAPT to a certain extent, and Arts and Disability Forum have now assumed some of the role that ADAPT would previously have done in terms of disability access and good practice in terms of the arts, both physical and intellectual accessibility. And that was a successful rationalisation, I think probably would be the right word there. But we've only had a few examples so far, and we need to see more of that, and that's what we're trying to encourage through the sustainability element of our funding, which will be available this year.
Okay. In all of that and gathering all that data information, how do you go about pulling that together then with all of these meetings and bringing it together? Particularly, I'm making reference to that because you did make reference to the voluntary redundancy scheme and the amount of your experienced staff that are going to, and that loss of knowledge and information and contacts and all that probably will go with that. How are you going to pull this all together when the two really aren't going to gel?
I think with increasing difficulty, I think we would have to be honest in terms of saying that. We have, for many years now, with our arts organisations, always, apart from just individual meetings with them in terms of grant management, which is routine, we would always bring them together in their various sectors. So, Maria has already given an example of the traditional arts audit and bringing together the traditional arts sector. We do that right across all our art form areas. And we find those very productive and valuable encounters because it's an opportunity for organisations to not only share information amongst themselves, but to maybe stand back and look at a bigger picture and say, well, what's happening to us is also happening to you. Can we work better or closer together? So that is very much the approach that we would adopt. We have our arts sector, we call them platforms for engagement, and we don't envisage those ceasing, because that's a touchstone for all of us. Where I think it will get difficult is really when we have set our organisations' targets. They have their own, we have our objectives, they have to meet those objectives, and they have targets set for them. With reduced resources, the very areas that we want and have encouraged our arts organisations over many years to deliver on in terms of access, education and outreach, in terms of the priorities that we and the Department and the Minister has set, those are the very areas that we run the risk of undermining, I think, unintentionally, of course. So I think that's going to be difficult for our arts organisations as they contract. They have to have at least a minimum core that sustains them before they can start to develop, the extensive outreach programme that they're all engaged in. So we're concerned about that.
Thank you.
Karen raised an important point there in terms of notification. Would it be possible to get a copy of the letter that was sent to the Arts Council from the department, so we know just what information was passed on and so on and when? That'd be helpful. Thank you. And Oliver McMullen.
Yes, thanks for your presentation. Where does disability play in your future plans? Building special needs in the arts. It's always a very vague section. And the other question is, how are we doing with the community plans within the new Council 11 Council model? I've attended one consultation, and congratulations, you have a very, very good woman in there doing the consultation, Shauna McCarthy. But again, I didn't hear much of disability or special needs within the consultation, so how do we get it up there in a separate group, not lumped in with other people? It'd be in there as a section of its own.
I think it's something that the board and council in general are quite passionate about in terms of disability arts and access to the arts. We have some extraordinary organisations in Northern Ireland which are at the cutting edge of best practice. People like the Arts and Disability Forum, Drake Music, Arts Care. I mean, there's a list of them that, with tiny amounts of money, they do the most extraordinary work. So it is a small sector. We recognise that. We've worked painstakingly with them to develop quality arts programming, artistic excellence in disability arts, and I would stress that because I think in the past it may have been an area that was considered to be any old thing will do, whereas in fact that is absolutely the wrong approach, and our arts organisations know that. So that's the first point I would want to make. Secondly, in terms of the community planning process, we're a small organisation, but we are engaged with the 11 councils in terms of the community planning process. But last week, in fact the day before we moved as a public body out to Lisburn, we held a symposium in the Burnavon Arts Centre in Cookstown, at which I think all of the 11 councils were represented, and we were talking to them about the important role of arts and culture in the community planning process and how we might help facilitate that. The whole concept was of the distinctiveness of each of our local council areas in terms of their arts and cultural offering in placemaking. And as you can imagine, there was a range of issues raised there, and I think that is the mechanism through which we can bring to bear the needs and the issues faced by people with disabilities as they try and access the arts.
Yeah. Perhaps I should have said I'm more coming at it from a rural perspective. Yes. And I'm pleased to hear you're saying that disability net is up there.
Very much so.
And I would love to see it as a separate section, not being lumped in with community or something else. It has to be separate along. along with the other people. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. I've just one last question that we didn't touch on. That was around our National Gallery, and I know that yourselves there are thoughts around that and plans. There's also, I understand, some suggestion from national museums around a similar concept. Are these two separate, or is it one and the same? And how's it going?
Well, Chairman, if we have a couple of minutes, perhaps,
Yes.
I was going to give you a bit of background to the journey, and it will answer that question, if that's okay,
Yes.
time-wise.
A few minutes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I think the committee is probably aware that the Arts Council has been advocating the case for a significant regional gallery for Northern Ireland since the 1990s. And obviously we've spent the morning talking about the huge significant pressures on funding for the arts. But I think it's very important to keep an eye to the future, hopefully when our economic situation may be better. So we always want to have ambition, and in that context, we also know, I don't think it's any secret indeed, and this committee has commented on it in the past, that a considerable amount of our artistic assets are not being displayed for the benefit of Northern Ireland citizens and visitors to the region. And we most recently articulated the case in our 5-year strategy, which runs up to 2018, Ambitions for the Arts. And in that we recognise very strongly that arts and culture are increasingly recognised globally as significant catalysts in urban regeneration, and the development of art museums and galleries are major economic anchors, and all of the studies prove that time and again. They provide powerful iconic symbols, they make our inner cities attractive and cultured places for business and tourism, and there's no doubt that they bring economic benefits. Despite that, Northern Ireland lacks a major gallery dedicated to the visual arts, and we strongly believe that a new space is needed to show the Indigenous collections, which are very rich, of Irish and Northern Irish art, which is held in trust on behalf of our citizens. And those collections in public ownership, which now include the former collection of the Arts Council, again a very fine, if I can call it, school of Northern Irish art, represent a rich, unexploited resource. And we feel it merits a dedicated gallery which will help to establish our credentials as a global centre for the visual arts. Our target to try and achieve that vision was first step to undertake an economic appraisal for the dedicated gallery, and the need for the economic appraisal was approved by the DCAL Minister, and we were delighted that the SIB provided the resource to take it forward through the service of John Adamson, one of their very experienced economists. John started work in December 2014. He engaged with a very broad range of key stakeholders. That included local authorities, government departments, national museums, Northern Ireland, galleries and major collections in the UK and Ireland. So a very thorough consultation process. An early draft was received by the Arts Council and sent to those stakeholders in June 2015. And pleased to say that the economic appraisal is thorough and detailed. It was discussed by the Arts Council Board in September and they've fully endorsed it. We've given the other stakeholders a little more time to consider later drafts because it's been a process of iteration. And we'll be drawing that part of the exercise to a conclusion soon and collating those responses as well as convening key meetings. Some of those have taken place already and others are scheduled. Indeed, it's been discussed by Belfast City Council. It was going through Derry City and Strabane District Council committees recently, and we're waiting to hear back. We've had initial responses from the DCAL economists, but we still have more meetings and more feedback to take. The economic appraisal in itself, obviously you'll appreciate that it's policy under development, and the document is still in draft form. It's still going through consultation, so I can't share obviously all of its contents at this stage, and that would take much too long. But from a very long list of potential options, including refurbishment and development of existing buildings, 5 options were carried through the economic appraisal. As you would expect, of course, the do nothing option, the extension to the Ulster Museum, which, as you say, has been discussed. A new build in Belfast, that's actually 2 options because they would be of differing scales. And a new build in Belfast with the development of a twin site in Derry City, probably at the Ebrington site. That is actually the preferred option at this stage in the appraisal, as it best meets the strategic priorities of the project, provides the optimum solution in terms of costs and benefits, and I think it is a very attractive option. That's the stage we're at, Chairman. We'd be very happy to share the economic appraisal with the committee in full when it's finalised and to report back to you. But absolutely, discussions with national museums are key, and in fact we're very much hoping that we'll move into a partnership arrangement with national museums to take forward the proposal.
I'm sure we'll come back to this. Just in the Ebrington case, would that be to reuse an existing building?
The Clock Tower site, yes.
Right, okay.
Probably with some extension, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much indeed. Members are around the table concerned about the current difficulties imposed through the cuts, but it's important that we also look forward to hopefully better days. But you can rest assured of our concern and our commitment on these issues. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Are members content to leave that issue as it is at the moment without any actions? We will be meeting the affected organisations next week and we're meeting in the MAC. So it might be helpful to defer any actions until then. In which case, the Minister, I gather, is here already. So if we consider then moving to the briefing from DCAL. Now, the Minister is here until no later than 1:30. We will have 2 hours and 10 minutes. There are 2 aspects to this. First of all, there is the issue of the cuts, and then the briefing on the festival funding. There is in your papers a list of an appendix to one letter which gives the what are described as inescapable pressures that are the cause of some of the cuts or the background to them. I think that does tie in with the first issue, which is the cuts, because the cuts and the cause of the cuts are obviously interrelated. The other element of drilling down into festival funding is a separate issue, and I would ask members to stay away from that at this stage, because we will have a second section of this on that. So it's item 4 on our agenda there. The Minister was invited on short notice to brief the committee, but she has made 2 hours available. We have to vacate the room by 1:30 because the Justice Committee meets at 2. Now, that means effectively we're going to have to curtail people's time so that everybody gets a chance. And I would ask, we're talking there of an hour probably on each of these. And if we count around the room, the number of people in the room, and an hour, you're talking about 4 minutes per person. So if we need to come back on another occasion, we can do that. But I think, just in fairness to everybody, if we keep it to that. So no long speeches, please, or statements or explanations. Keep questions as short and focused as possible. Now, you'll have briefing papers there. You have the clerk's memo, 4.1. 4.2 is the DCAL overview of recent cuts to arts organisations, page 92. The consultation concordat between voluntary and community sector and Northern Ireland Government is at page 96, because that was talked about previously. Point 44, the tabled papers, page 3, and decal responsory, the fund for the arts organisations. And then tabled papers, page 7, decal responsory, inescapable pressures. And then tabled papers, page 12, the papers from the department read the June monitoring round. We should have actually asked the Arts Council when they were in about the future of the Sustainability Fund. But we could write to them about that, because I understand that may not be taking place. Okay?
Yeah, perfect.
That's great. Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We welcome to the meeting the Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure, the Permanent Secretary, Dr Dennis McMahon, the Director of Culture Division, Patricia McCauley, and the Director of Capital Portfolio, who's Joanna McConway. And if you would like to make an opening statement now, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Margaret Carley, thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to the committee, and thank you for the invitation. I welcome this opportunity to update you all on the Arts Council's budget reduction and indeed on the cultural programme. But firstly, I want to make it clear that austerity is not the choice of the Executive, and it certainly isn't my choice. I have been put in this position due to cuts imposed by the Conservative government, and that continues to erode our black grant. My department's opening budget position was around £10 million, which is 10% less in the current year than last year. Due to the lack of monitoring around this summer, I have been faced with having to reprioritise that budget and to deal with health and safety, statutory commitments and stated priorities, many of which are also consistent with the Executive's priorities. To take actions and to measure and indeed tackle poverty, social exclusion and disadvantage as set out in Delivering Social Change and Together Building United Community. In the context of such constrained resources, the easy option would have been to play safe. The easy option would have been to salami slice reductions and do the minimum. The easiest option would have been to ignore the tremendous needs of the most marginalised people in our community. But I believe as Minister that taking the easy option is not good enough for me and other colleagues who are charged with the well-being of our society. I have also been asked to reprioritise the Department's budget to address inescapable pressures of £1.9 million. Of these, the cultural programme received £200,000, while £300,000 was also made available for the T-Buck programme, a key executive priority designed to bring people together from different parts of our community, particularly young people, to include the most marginalised as well. The remaining budget was dispersed to meet statutory needs, such as new regulations for the Public Records Office, board appointments for museums, and I've also made resources available to deal with health and safety risks in the Armagh Observatory and Planetarium, and also to support museums in its review of the risks of hazardous materials in its collections. In addition to this, I sought to meet binding ministerial commitments, including those for programmes which are run by governing bodies to promote equality and tackle exclusion, the Ministerial Advisory Group for Ulster Scots, the North West continuing the legacy of the City of Culture, and the successful Leafwood programme. In total, this additional necessary expenditure amounts to £1.9 million, and that's had to be found from existing resources. But these are limited sources of funding. Some of the arm's length bodies, such as museums, use the majority of their budget on staff and cannot therefore achieve significant additional savings at this point in the year, which means I've had to look at reductions in budgets in the department and also the Arts Council, sports and libraries. While the absolute value of the reduction of the Arts Council is higher, it's at £870,000. It's higher than other organisations, but it's the same percentage as the reduction for sports. My department's own grant budget will be reduced by 7%, and together with reductions to payroll, this will amount to £1,416,000. While I've tried to protect libraries' budget in the past, I've also had to ask for savings of £350,000. I will, of course, and it's my commitment to continue to try and secure additional funding, not only for the arts but for all cultural services that deliver to all our people.
In the meantime, it's necessary to take decisions in the context of the Conservative Government's austerity programmes. Since I became Minister, I have been determined that arts and culture be a means to promote equality and tackle poverty and social exclusion. Access to the arts and culture is a right for everyone. It's not a privilege. We can all agree that arts and culture deliver a range of benefits to people who participate in them and engage with them, not at least in terms of people who experience mental ill health and poor well-being. But while many people can already participate, others remain marginalised, and that is something that none of us want to continue. In the summer, the Arts Council asked its annually funded organisations to set out possible impact of funding for in-year reductions in the region of 7 to 10% as part of contingency planning. I recognise that this was prudent planning by the Arts Council, and the Board deliberated on how any reductions might be applied and formed on a working group to consider the most appropriate approach. When the budget reduction materialised, Arts Council was able to absorb £250,000 from Arts Development Fund, which is used for strategic initiatives, and a 7% reduction was passed on to the 32 organisations. It's also important to state that all of the 32 organisations are still being funded to the amount of over £8 million. I have met with members of the Board of the Arts Council, including the Chair, and members of their executive, to hear first-hand what the effect of this funding reduction is likely to be and what impact this would have on the sector's ability to deliver access to the arts for everyone. I acknowledge and recognise the challenges that this will bring. I was presented with a dossier of evidence to demonstrate the contribution that arts funding has made to help achieve my department's objectives in relation to the promotion of equality, tackling social exclusion, and how it assists with achievement of the Executive's wider priorities. This evidence is helpful and will inform how I allocate any additional resources that are made in the future. I have supported the arts and culture extensively, including the Arts Council, and between 2011 and the current year, a budget of £75 million has been provided to the Arts Council. Turning to the cultural programme, I want to first clear up a point raised by the committee that it only became aware of the programme in the course of a separate briefing on Community Festivals Fund on the 22nd of October. That is simply not the case. In preparation for coming here today, I asked my officials to carry out a search of our records going as far back as 2013. 13 oral briefings to the CAL Committee were undertaken, either by officials or myself, on the topics around the cultural programme. 2 of the briefings were recorded in Hansard. The first was on post-project evaluation of the World Police and Fire Games. The focus of the questions was on how funding was spent and possible future events. The second briefing was by me, the then Permanent Secretary Peter May, and Joanna McConway on the legacy plans for City of Culture. In addition, the committee wrote to the Department in June and September of 2013 seeking updates on the cultural programme for the World Police and Fire Games. My responses outlined a £500,000 bid in June monitoring round that was to deliver the programme, and advised that the Department had decided to incorporate additional cultural events from the 3 established festivals: Belfast Film Festival, Field and Fubble, and the McCracken Summer School. A written briefing was provided to the committee on the 6th of March 2014, again outlining the funding provided by DCAL. To maximise opportunities and to showcase and promote our cultural sectors to both local people and international visitors. This paper pointed out that the programme included offers from the 3 established festivals. Michelle McElveen, the then chair of the CAL Committee, asked 2 written questions in 2013 about the application process and the criteria for the groups wishing to access funding to deliver the content for the cultural programme, and how the £500,000 bid will be spent. The responses outlined that the bid was supported by a business case and that there was no open call for applications, but that the programme was an extension of activities already on offer by DCAL's ALBs and indeed PRONI. When the first cultural programme took place in 2013, to coincide with the World Police and Fire Games, I wrote to the committee advising that a bid of £500,000 has been made in that June monitoring round for a cultural programme. I appreciate that the Chair was not in the position at the time. However, he was Minister in the Executive and agreed, as part of my colleagues, agreed to bid in June monitoring round for 2013. I would also like to state clearly for the record that the cultural programme, which my department funded for the first time in 2013, is separate to the Communities Festival Fund. The Communities Festival Fund was established by DCAL in 2006. The main purpose was to improve the capacity of the community festivals and make them less reliant on public funding by providing support and training as well as funding towards events. In the year 2008 and 2009, the delivery of the Communities Festival Fund transferred to local councils to allow decisions to be made on the funding of festivals at a local level and to enable the councils to tailor the policy to best suit the local needs. The committee is aware that DCAL carries out an evaluation of the Communities Festival Fund each year, and based on reports provided by the council on their Communities Festival Fund activities. The expectation, and indeed the realisation, that the World Police and Fire Games would bring significant numbers to our towns and villages proved to be true. The City of Culture experience was about raising momentum right across Ireland. It was crucial that we did not miss out on an opportunity to gain maximum benefit and legacies from these events. In 2013, I received a proposal on behalf of 3 established Belfast festivals that had spotted a unique and valuable opportunity. Of course, these groups proactively lobbied not only DCAL, but Daddy and Tourism Northern Ireland, Belfast City Council and Visit Belfast for funding for a programme to the World Police and Fire Games, and I think that is to be expected. They also made a presentation to the board of the World Police and Fire Games. They were seeking support for what they knew would bring a great public value, and they were correct in that assumption. A business case was developed, scrutinised and approved funding was awarded. The business case was robust and subjected to normal processes. Indeed, in my view, this initiative was subjected to detailed governance processes. As I said earlier, there was no open call for applications, as I, with others, have been approached with a proposal that met a definite need, and I responded positively. Indeed, to have done otherwise, in my view, would have been a failure on my part as Minister, and it would have been a missed opportunity for all. Had I not supported this venture then, as I do today, we would be lagging behind in terms of recognising the value of culture and arts that can bring to our society. A post-project evaluation of the 2013 cultural programme was carried out, and all of the stated objectives were achieved. The demand for activities exceeded expectations, particularly in terms of some of the attendance figures. There were over 250 plus free events and approximately 4,000 free tickets to headline international concerts given out to hard-to-reach and disadvantaged communities. There were over 300 events across over 40 venues, with events in every part of Belfast, north, south, east and west, including Shankill, and indeed the Belfast City Centre. There were events and activities suited all ages and interests across various art forms. Events were scheduled throughout the day, morning, afternoon and evening, and there was literally something for everyone. The McCracken partners reported that it had provided an inclusive, accessible programme for all members of the local community and indeed some overseas visitors, engaging with members of the community who, in their view, would not normally take part in arts and cultural activities. Belfast was portrayed in a very positive light for visiting this cultural city. The numbers of attendees and participants from deprived communities was high, with 15% of participants coming from the top 10 disadvantaged wards in the north and 23% coming from the top 20 deprived wards. Departmental partners reported positive feedback, for example, from Prony highlighted increased visitors, including a number of World Police and Fire Games participants. Mobile exhibitions took place, one on the history of the Harbour Police, a family and local history weekend fair, and an exhibition on Ulster Scots shipbuilders. A prisoner art exhibition took place at the Waterfront Hall. All of these events attracted considerable interest. In Lisburn, an Ulster Scots agency supported event, the Forgathering event, which was attended by some 4,500 people. So it is true to say that some festivals would still have taken place without the funding provided for the Workplace and Fire Games. However, undoubtedly, the success and scale of these events would have been greatly reduced. There would have been less capacity at events, reduced marketing and therefore awareness, reduced footfall and therefore reduced economic spend, and reduced social regeneration, reduced visitors' numbers and indeed visitor experience. These failures would have impacted very badly on our visitors at that time. So, building on the successful 2013 City of Culture year, I committed to ensuring that a lasting legacy to maximise the long-term impact of City of Culture. I have stated publicly in my commitment to ensuring that that legacy extends to the wider North West. So, between January 2014 and March 2015, I secured more than £6 million to help realise that legacy. In my view, it is equally appropriate to apply that same commitment to build the legacy across the North on the success of the 2013 cultural programme. The committee is aware that one of my important priorities as Minister has been to promote equality and tackle poverty and social exclusion. I believe the cultural programme in 2013 and since has successfully demonstrated and supported these principles. I am therefore happy to support partnerships of all persuasions and opportunities that deliver on these priorities. It is vital that delivery is not just about ticking boxes. In that context, I therefore supported a second year of the cultural programme in 2014. That business case proposed a broader partnership to include Féile an Phobail, Belfast Film Festival, Duncairn Arts Centre, Spectrum Centre, Ardoyne Community Association and Arts Acta. The then cultural partners began a programme that complemented and ran in parallel with the CALD's T-Box Sports and Creative Arts programmes. Here again was an established and experienced festival group in a position to collaborate and partner with other organisations to deliver a successful programme. I think it is worth stating that Féile an Phobail has a well-proven record. The committee's own inquiry into inclusion in the arts of working class communities heard from East Side Arts of East Belfast, who stated that the partnership had no background in running festivals or arts events and, quote, it has 25 years to catch up with West Belfast. In 2015-16, my department is supporting another cultural programme, which is a cross-community programme of arts and cultural events and festivals delivered by cultural partners from right across Belfast, and also for the first time from a rural area. The programme celebrates all cultural traditions in a coordinated, inclusive and cross-community basis, with the primary focus on targeting disadvantaged communities and those marginalised in our community. I am and will remain committed to doing what I can to broaden the access to and availability of arts and culture for everyone. I am committed to bringing forward a strategy for arts and culture, and I will be launching a consultation on this strategy within 3 weeks. I look forward to the consultation, given the attention that is currently focused on arts and culture. I hope this consultation energises all members to help me make a resounding case for appropriate and sustainable funding for arts and culture as we all move forward. Our focus should be to encourage and provide the circumstances that support organisations and communities to work together to seize opportunities to grow and indeed to develop. As an example, Féile an Phobail, which was established in the late 1980s, is now the largest community festival in Ireland, with a growing international reputation. Why wouldn't I and others fund this? And indeed, why wouldn't we fund these partnerships? Many festival organisers want to aspire to this success. Féile an Phobail now works with East Belfast Festival to help develop its capacity, and I think this is surely a legacy we all can support. I thank the members for their time, and I'm happy to take questions for myself.
Thank you. Could I ask, first of all, in one of the items here that we received, it was the letter headed Re-Arts Council of Northern Ireland funding cuts. There was an indication there, Arts Council 870, then Libraries 350 and Sport NI £320,000. We add them all up with the departmental one, that's almost £2 million. In Annex 1 it lists inescapable pressures. Could I ask the Permanent Secretary what his understanding is of inescapable pressures?
Well, as I've indicated previously to the committee chair, it would be obviously statutory health and safety issues, statutory obligations more generally, and over and above that, ministerial commitments, binding ministerial commitments, and we've included those in those.
What constitutes a binding ministerial commitment?
It's where the minister has made a very clear commitment that that she wishes to achieve a particular objective and to fund a particular programme in order to do that.
Is that the understanding of DFP as to inescapable commitments?
I need to ask DFP about their specific understanding of it.
Have you any experience of them agreeing to a range of things of the diversity that we have here? Is it not that inescapable pressures are inescapable, i.e. they are contractual? There's a contract entered into, has to be committed. There's a statutory obligation to do something, or there's a requirement on the grounds of health and safety. Other things are preferences, desirable, but not inescapable.
Well, the thing about DFP's views on those is that DFP sees the detail of those, so they will know exactly on what basis each of those commitments is included. And in addition to that, I suppose it is the case that in priorities coming forward, priorities are informed by ministerial views.
Yeah,
and that happens in all departments.
In terms of a binding ministerial commitment, it lists there in that list, there are 3 items there, for example, relating to LIFA, bursary scheme, a grant scheme, advertising, 48,000. That makes a total of around £120,000. Are those binding in the sense, have those been contracts signed?
No, they're not contractual commitments.
Not contractual. So it's simply desirable.
Well, they're binding ministerial priorities. In
binding in what sense?
Well, binding in the sense that the Minister has made a very clear commitment that she wishes LIFA to continue.
Yeah, but a wish is not a binding thing.
Well, again, we operate as officials under the direction and control of
So it's
ministers.
a political direction that was given for this?
It is a political... We take as officials, we take our direction from ministers.
And
that is our role.
Did you give advice to the Minister that if she went down the road of allocating money away or siphoning money off from certain arts organisations to allocate them to other organisations and projects, that might have a very damaging effect on the arts infrastructure in Northern Ireland?
Well, we, in all of the advice we've given, we have given options, and the options have highlighted all of the benefits and risks associated with each of them. That's what we've done, and that's what we would always do.
You're quite relaxed about the fact that the money that we're presented with a document here which refers to inescapable pressures, and it refers here to binding ministerial commitments, but they're not contractual. Is that not? Some of us might feel that was rather disingenuous, that the word binding is not an appropriate word. Their wishes.
I think the key point is that we're open and transparent about the approach that we have used. We're open and transparent both here at the committee. We've made it very clear what binding ministerial commitments mean. We've made it very clear to finance colleagues, and obviously it's made very clear in bids going up to DFP. So those can be considered, and the merits can be considered on that basis.
Could I ask again, on that sheet it refers to £200,000 for a cross-community cultural festival in Belfast. Is that different from the £200,000 allocated to the cultural programme?
That is the same.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the same thing. It's cultural programme is now called the Cross-Community Cultural Festival in Belfast. Okay, that's clear. The other point here is, much as I used to enjoy fishing, and I'm sure that it is extremely desirable to increase female participation in fishing. At the point where we're making savage cuts, or rather the department's making savage cuts on established organisations which could endanger the existence of these, is it really a binding ministerial commitment to allocate £22,000 to a Loch Ness grant to increase female participation in fishing?
Well, it's not for me to comment on political priorities, but what I will say is that certainly as far as the work that the Inland Fisheries team has taken forward, this included, it has focused very much on participation, and they've been able to actually engage groups and people who are marginalised and who would not normally be involved in any sort of sporting or cultural activities, and they've brought them in through fishing. So I think wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on political priorities, but I think all I can say is that the minister's commitments.
But to claw back money from organisations that have had money allocated to them, to claw it back in year, to allocate it to fishing in Loughney, £22,000. Now, highly commendable activity, I'm sure. Is that really good practice?
The key thing from my point of view is that any of the money that we spend complies with the principles of regularity, propriety and value for money. Within that, then, it is a matter of getting ministerial priorities and applying those ministerial priorities to those judgments. And that's the approach we've used.
Okay, we'll come back to the issue of inescapable and the meaning of the word inescapable in due course, I'm sure. Rosie McCormack?
Margaret Caherly, thanks, Chair.
Sorry, 5 minutes each.
We're working on 5 minutes to start off. Yeah.
Sorry?
5 minutes we have each.
Right, okay, no bother. Agus Gurmayagov, Asan Carolaher. Thanks for the presentation. Minister, you referred to the fact that there have been, I think, 13 mentioned presentations on the cultural programme, so it's been something that we've been kept up to speed on over the past couple of years, and it was initially funded for £500,000. But can you give me the rationale as to why that funding has reduced since then?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I mean, the funding reduced maybe because of the budget situation that we're all operating in, and it's reduced year on from its establishment with the department in 2013. Interesting to note that the reduction in a time where more partners are coming as part of the cultural partnership, and for this partnership and indeed for arts and cultural in general, I'm firmly committed to try to ensure we get additional funds to support their work.
Okay, and in terms of your priorities, would you say that was value for money?
Oh, it's absolutely value for money. Not only do I think it's value for money, but certainly governance and due diligence and anecdotal evidence has shown that it is value for money. Like, for example, which is now the Duncarn Arts Centre, but then it was part of the McCracken Festival. We had people saying that there were visitors to some of their events and exhibitions that have never been there before, and certainly engaged with some of the services, and I think they felt that certainly even for that alone, that is something that needs to be invested and built upon in future years.
Okay. Another question. Can I ask, how do you intend to get cross-party support for your arts, culture programmes and other elements of your departmental work, which are, really important? And can this committee play a role in achieving that?
Well, I think this committee has played a role, certainly in highlighting the importance of culture and arts. The strategy, which I will bring forward in no later than 3 weeks' time, will go out to public consultation. And I believe, even just in terms of the people who were here on Tuesday, I think most parties, if not all, supported them. And I was really delighted to see that. I think it was the first time that there was obvious cross-party support for arts and culture. I hope that's sustained. And I also hope, like many other ministers, if we ever do get a monitoring round, that all the parties who are involved in the executive will, and even those who are outside, will give support for that.
Okay, Guramagat, and do you intend to meet your executive colleagues to promote the merits of an interdepartmental responsibility for culture and arts in the same way that there is for sport? And would you be proposing an overarching group made up of officials and practitioners to monitor implementation and progress of such a strategy?
Yes, in short, yes. The Sports Matters strategy, which was an interdepartmental strategy, which is an interdepartmental strategy, has been resourced. It's also got a Sports Matters monitoring group, which I believe has been effective, and I would hope something similar would be the result of the consultation to the Arts and Cultural Strategy. I believe it's important not only to review progress, but also to review implementation and indeed how we're going to meet challenges in the future. So I would be certainly talking to executive colleagues and talking to party spokespeople on culture and arts to try and get some support.
Very Margaret.
Thank you, Gordon Dunn.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Thanks, Minister and staff, for coming in today, and we appreciate your contribution. In relation to inescapable pressures, we have the Irish Language Strategy Act here. How do you justify spending 12,000 on something which is really just a Sinn Féin pipe dream? It's not going to happen in relation to the Irish Language Strategy Act. How do you justify that, saying that 12,000 is inescapable?
Well, you're getting two things mixed up. So one's an Irish Language Act and one's a strategy for the Irish language, and both also involve the Ulster Scots culture and heritage as well. So I think it's important that when we go forward to meet the needs of the sectors.
Sorry, this refers to the Irish Language Strategy Act.
That's how it's worded in the annex of your letter. An SLPG translation, whatever that means. I don't know. What is SLPG?
Perhaps, Minister, could I clarify? This was actually costs for translation of the Act and also translation into sign language translations.
Oh, sign language, that
yes,
right.
I beg your pardon. We should have spelled that out.
Yeah, so apologies, Gordon. I can see you just read out literally what was in front of you, but certainly I think it's value for money. Setting aside, and I'll talk on the translation for sign language partnership after that, but I think it is important that when you're putting strategies out, particularly around languages, that you do it in a language that people feel comfortable with, as well as English. So I don't view it as something that isn't value for money.
And you feel, it's inescapable. There was no way you could avoid that.
No, absolutely not. And I also would like to say to you, I resent the fact that you refer to it as a Sinn Féin pipe dream, because I believe the sectors, and indeed most people who responded to those consultations were from across the community. They'd done so in a way that was mature, they'd done so in a way which was open, and actually went above and beyond what they were asked to do. And have asked me, not just from the Irish language sector, but from the Ulster Scots community, to ensure that there's sustainability brought forward for the next mandate. And I believe these strategies actually help departments do that.
Okay. Second point then. You did make mention of the people that were here, the protesters, if you want, the people that came up here last week and made, a genuine protest, and I think eventually you did meet them. How do you justify giving £50,000 for prisoners and setting up a programme to engage with prisoners and offenders, and yet you deny the money to the protesters, those that are engaged in the arts sector and who had to come here and make a strong protest before their voice was heard and recognised by yourself? How do you justify that, or is this a matter of a political decision again that you've made as a minister?
Well, it's not a political decision that I've made as a minister. For example, we have been involved with the Department of Justice, and indeed I even remember my involvement when I was on the Health Committee with the role of healthcare and health and wellbeing and arts for prisoners. So there was a partnership between the Department of Health and then the prisons. This is something, and there are many programmes that we've done before and hopefully will do since. This is one of the examples where an interdepartmental strategy for arts and culture will not only help inform, this was a pre-release scheme, will help inform each department of where the needs are, but ensure that there's a better collaboration of the outcome. The arts programmes within the prisons, and indeed many others, have proven to be very, very successful.
So you did put funding of prisoners before protesters?
No,
You're trying to justify it as inescapable?
No, I am justifying it, and I think the way in which you have put the context in is regrettable.
50,000 for prisoners. Don't think it can be justified.
Well, I have, and I'll continue to.
You've tried. Stadium support, 126,000. What's all that about? Is that more to do with the failure of casement? Service critical, it comes under Annex 1.
Yes, I see it.
126,000. What's that about, please?
Donna.
It's not directly related to casement. That's work in relation to ministerial priorities with the governing bodies.
What does that entail, please?
Well, do you want me to, I mean, this is funds that I think you actually supported the last time. This is additional monies to the 3 governing bodies for promoting equality, tackling poverty, particularly with grassroots groups that they are working with. I mean, certainly the 3 governing bodies collectively and individually, but gladly to say collectively, have continued to lobby for these funds. It's actually helped young people be involved in the sports and actually, just to say, safe and healthy and to participate in physical activity.
Well, you know, it's
right. No, I think the number of these issues, it's the issue around how it's described. When it says stadium support, if it had said government bodies support or something.
No, I appreciate at the presentation. We'll certainly have a look at that again for future.
That would be helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
But just all I would say on that, you know, it's probably a good cause and good causes, but is it service critical in relation to priorities against other drastic cuts that are now being implemented amongst a whole range of very good community-based arts groups?
And I appreciate your support for these groups and look forward to that support being carried through by all the parties.
Thank you. William Humphrey.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you all very much for your attendance. Could I just ask, in relation to funding for marching bands, Minister, you will be aware I've written to you a couple of times about this.
You have.
The funding has been cut. It was reduced from 202,000 to 104,000 last year. Why has that been cut?
It's a situation that we're in. I think that we need to accept, even though people may not share the way in which I describe it, but we're dealing with a very, very difficult budget that has been, first of all, our Black Grant, after we agreed a programme for government in 2011, has been cut by the British government. They have signalled again in the summer, as recent as the summer, that they're going to do more of the same. So it'll be hundreds of millions of pounds additional taken off our budgets.
But did he also cut £870,000? And I think the Arts Council absorbed some of it. But you cut £870,000 from the Arts Council's budget.
And indeed, the other budgets for other members of the DCAL family have been reduced.
And I'm coming to that. I mean, the Ulster Scots Agency's budget has been cut. In 2012, it was just over £2 million. It's been cut to 2014 to £1,188,000.
And see, without my support at the North-South meetings, it would have been cut even further, and I think that's been recognised by the agency.
Okay. Well, can I ask then you, Mr McMahon, as the Permanent Secretary of the Department, I wrote to the Minister twice recently asking 2 questions in relation to the funding for LIFA, and I got answers back. So far to date, total spent to date from September 2011, £831,000, and then there's about £70,000 you can add on there in terms of salaries that are projected for the next while. So it's about £900,000. Can I ask you, in terms of probity and policy, as the senior civil servant in the department, are you going to stand over cuts to the Arts Council of Northern Ireland at near £900,000, cuts of about half their expenditure in 2 years to the Ulster Scots Agency, removal of funding to marching bands, while £900,000 on top of the £3 million that Forest na Gaeilge gets, £900,000 on a pet project for the Minister inside your department?
Well, I think there's a couple of things in that. The first thing is, I'll come back to the point that the role is to ensure that expenditure is regular, variety and value for money. And nothing that we have talked about, or none of the projects that we've talked about, or the programmes, or all of the projects and all of the programmes that we've talked about, rather, I should say, have business cases. They have economic appraisals in advance. They're monitored to ensure that we're getting delivery of outcomes. If you take a look at LIFA itself, there's been a huge growth in the number of people signing up to LIFA, and a lot of success in that. Now, the issue then comes into when you start using terms such as pet projects. That's a value judgment, and in a sense, it's a political judgment.
Okay, how did it come about then?
How did what come about? The LIFA programme?
Yeah.
I launched
Project. Sorry?
I launched it in September 2011.
But whose idea was, whose concept was it?
Mine.
Right. So how am I inaccurate in what I've said?
I didn't say you're inaccurate. What I said was that characterising it in the terms of a pet project.
How is that inaccurate then in the context of what the Minister's just said?
It's completely inaccurate.
So, as a ministerial priority, is every ministerial priority a pet project?
Well, I'm asking you that. In the interest of probity and policy, sir, I'm asking you as the Permanent Secretary, given the cuts that have been imposed on the Arts Council, the Ulster Scots Agency and the eradication of funding to marching bands, as Permanent Secretary of DCAL, £900,000 being spent on LIFA inside your department, which the Minister has said is her project.
Well, as a Permanent Secretary and as an official who has worked for ministers from across a full range of parties, I would not count any of the ministerial priorities that I've worked to deliver as being pet projects.
Can I ask then, where's the Ulster Scots equivalent to LIFA?
Can I answer that? I've been asking that question from September 2011.
Well, that's interesting, because can I just say, Chair, that I asked a question in the House. I asked the Minister where the equivalent was. Minister, in her reply to my question, said, I've met the Ulster Scots Agency on several occasions and asked for an equivalent. I wrote to the Chief Executive of the Ulster Scots Agency, Mr Crozier, and got this reply on the 9th of March 2015. I can confirm that no meetings have taken place with the Minister to discuss the development of an Ulster Scots equivalent to LIFA.
Well, there are proposals and there is a business case. There is also a review of Magus.
Well, where does it sit now?
As of now, it has not yet been approved.
Why not? Whenever. First of all, I asked this question in the chamber last year, and around this time last year, LIFA came to conception in September 2011.
Maybe to talk about Magus.
So first of all, I think it's completely ridiculous, to be frank, that I have been asking for a LIFA type equivalent from the Ulster Scots Agency from 2011 and it hasn't happened. There is now a proposal after years of asking for a proposal or a programme that I am quite happy to support. Now, the business case isn't about a ministerial decision. It's obviously about things that need to be, there in order for a business case to be approved. When that is approved, I would be happy to launch that initiative with the same enthusiasm and energy as I have with
I know my
LIFA.
time's up, Chair, but no further questions. All I'll say is the Hansard will record what I've quoted from Mr Crozier.
I'm going now to another question, but just to put on record, I think it was actually not the Ulster Scots Agency. I think it was a civil servant within the department who is employed in the Magus. That civil servant was tasked with developing LIFA. Now, I'm not going to name the individual, but he was tasked because he told me. Is that not correct?
And one of the factors which I referred to earlier was the Magus review.
Yeah, and to be honest,
the civil servant, it wasn't the agency. So we get quite clear where the responsibility for bringing it forward lies.
yes, but can I also, just for clarification, Chair, because I think it's fair that I be given an opportunity to clarify, I did speak to Ian Crozier about this. I did indicate my support.
Is there a record? Is there a letter or something?
Yes, I have a letter.
No, is there a letter to him asking him to get this underway?
No, I spoke to him personally about this.
I think normally, if you're dealing with something that's substantial, this it would be good practice to have something in writing.
No, except I tell you what I will do. I'll put it in writing. I will make sure that it's in writing to ensure the people aren't selective about what they remember
it's too
and what
late
they
now,
don't.
insofar as there's
Well, I've got it in the record.
Cathal Hushin.
There is Darren Foster,
How are you?
Can I just say I do regret that we're talking about language here today, the use of and intent of some of the language used here today. You did announce earlier there, Minister, in terms of the consultation on the arts and cultural strategy, that you expect to launch that within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I think it would be a regular time scale. What would be the time scale then for the delivery of it?
Well, certainly already there has been a lot of work put in by the Ministerial Advisory Group around this. I mean, it's made up of lots of people involved from the arts and cultural sector who actually designed the strategy. For us, we will be launching it within no later than 3 weeks. It'll go out to a consultation. The consultation will be returned and we will be preparing, certainly for the end of this mandate and getting into the next one, hopefully a very robust strategy.
And how particularly would this inform any future budget and particularly going into the next CSR?
Well, I think it's good when you're putting in bids, certainly to the next comprehensive spending review, that you've done it with the due diligence exercise, but particularly when the needs have been put out there, I suppose the future trends of culture and arts, emerging needs of culture and arts, but the broad spectrum that it all is, needs to be reflected in a programme for government, a new programme for government, in my opinion, in the same way, and certainly within the terms of reference for the new Department of Communities. I think it should be done in the same way that sports is.
You mentioned, Minister, in terms of the cultural programme going back to 2013 and in 2014-15, those were agreed at executive level?
Well, the cultural programme wasn't a secret, apart from the fact that the cultural programmers extensively lobbied as many people, as funders, as they possibly thought that would have an influence in bringing this programme forward. And indeed, my work with the World Police and Fire Games Board were very appreciative of the fact that, given that we had in 2012 a very successful cultural Olympiad for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, that not to have a cultural programme not only was a slight oversight on their part because they were focused primarily on the games, but they seen the benefits that it would bring. Visit Belfast, seen the benefits that it would bring, indeed tourism, seen the benefits it would bring, but more importantly, the participants in those cultural events benefit from that programme. That programme was bid for as part of a monitoring round. That monitoring round was scrutinised, as Dennis has outlined, by the Department of Finance and Personnel, and indeed by other, well, certainly other departments in terms of what potentially they could add to it as well. But on the basis of that, the bid was cleared and the bid was made. But it was all very, very transparent. Certainly met all due diligence and governance requirements, and indeed has had a very successful post-project evaluation.
And do you have any intimation then of any of the current or outstanding monitoring rounds? And I hope, obviously, then you would hope to bid again then to restore part of your budget of all.
I mean, this is something that many people, not just specifically to culture and arts and leisure, but certainly in my own constituency, we met very recently families who are heavily reliant on health and social care. And one of the things is that people are asking us, so it's even from that right through the culture and arts sector, if there, will there be a bid, and if there is a bid, can you ensure that A, B, C or D happens? First of all, we didn't have a bid. We're involved in discussions at the minute. I would hope there would be a bid, but I have no guarantee that there will be. If there is, I'd certainly put a bid in that I was intending to put in June with additional certainly pressures added to that, because I think it's important that in the context of Tory austerity that we try and meet the gaps, not only within my department but certainly within others.
Okay. Thank you. Alderman McMullen.
Thanks, Chair, and welcome, Minister. Is there any examples of investment you've made to the advisory group, Ministerial Advisory Group on Ulster Scots and Ulster Scots Agency?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few examples, certainly. I know that in the past that we looked at, let me see, I mean, the Ministerial Advisory Group, just to refresh the committee's memory, in 2014 and indeed 2015 and 16, but certainly 2014, DCAL provided £428,000 of resource and £365,000 in capital to the Ministerial Advisory Group in Ulster Scots. And this year we provided £445,000. The capital in 2014-15 did, however, include the refurbishment of Corn Exchange, and we're certainly considering the need for additional capital monies. DCAL has provided, I would say, almost £2 million to the Ulster Scots Agency. Well, the member pointed out that it's almost £1.9 million. The Ulster Scots Agency in 2014, as approved by their business plan. And I believe, particularly in terms of the ministerial advisory group in Ulster Scots, that has been a very successful investment, particularly in terms of the move to Corn Exchange, which I believe has benefited the Ulster Scots community.
Thank you. And just the other one is, we talked about the bidding for funding. If the bands fund, for example, we've heard mention of the bands here this morning, if the bands fund were to be restored, would you ensure that it is open to all types of bands? And could this form part of the consultation?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a fund for marching bands. I think even there was certainly, and there has been a demand for any future funds to include other types, for example, traditional music, and just and for that matter, any other type of band. I would like to see that money restored and added to be honest. I believe that the musical output that we have, particularly in the north, to be frank, is second to none in any part of this island. I believe that the role in which bands, not specifically marching bands, although they're included in this, the role of bands and indeed traditional music, particularly in rural communities, has actually helped children and young people and give them a skill that actually transcends from one generation to another. So I can see the merit in trying to get additional funds for that fund.
Mike?
If it is a priority to have money for the musical instruments fund for bands, why did you not include it in your ministerial commitments list here as of Annex 1?
Well, it's a priority, but there are other...
it's a lower priority?
Yeah, it is. It is. As far as I'm concerned, it is.
Lower priority to provide musical instruments than to have fishing in Loch Ness for
girls.
22,000.
Yes, for women who are here at the minute, a Section 75 group who don't feel included, which is a statutory obligation.
And indeed, yes.
Yes.
I think everybody falls into some Section 75 group.
Yes.
Karen McKellar.
I might just make a point on that as well in terms of marching bands, because obviously we've been doing
all bands.
Some work.
It doesn't actually say marching bands in the form, it's just bands.
Sure, but just in the context of some of the work that we've been doing in the Northwest, the feedback that we've had is that the musical instruments scheme is not necessarily the priority for that sector, certainly in the Northwest.
Have you asked the umbrella body for the whole of Northern Ireland?
No, and that's why I'm casting it in the context of the Northwest.
But would it not be useful then, before commenting on it, Joanna, to actually speak to the Confederation of Ulster Bands?
But I think in the context,
it is the umbrella body.
In the context of what we have been bidding for as inescapable pressures, one of the inescapable pressures included within what we have presented is actually funding for the Londonderry Bands Forum in the Northwest to take forward capacity building, which they see as higher priority at the moment than the musical instruments.
So just to be clear, the Londonderry Bands Forum has said that the musical instruments fund is not their priority.
That their capacity building at this time is higher priority.
But they're not the number one priority then for them is not.
No, they didn't say that, and I think
they say that, but they said that capacity building is their number one priority.
Yes, that's what I said. That it's not that for them the musical instruments is not the number one priority because something else is. That's okay.
Yes.
That's fine.
But they still see it as a priority.
They do still see it as a priority, but
obviously not a ministerial priority. Karen McKellar.
Thanks very much. The arts have become a key social and economic driver right across Ireland, and helping making areas, I suppose, what could I say, a more attractive place to live and to work for volunteers all around. And we've seen that as an example in the best games ever of the workplace and fire games. I suppose it's known, or can be known, and should be known for traditional divisions being broken, but maybe not round this table today. And the less said about that, the better, because I'm afraid of the crisis that the arts are currently in, with the budget restraints going to get lost in the conversation. So, and I know I have a time limit of 5 minutes to question it, but in a press statement recently, you said the arts are not a luxury; they are a right, and that is right. And if access to the arts are right, how will you, the Minister, and your department ensure that the rights is protected and upheld? In particular, I would like you to make reference to the 32 organisations that are facing a crisis to their funding.
Well, first of all, I appreciate your comments in terms of the workplace and fire games. I did see you at the events not only of them, but certainly of the Cultural Olympiad around the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And to be honest, I think, notwithstanding yourself and some other members, the community out there don't want their views and their opinions to be reflected by people making what I believe is political points and are involved in stroke politics. The issue that I have, and the issue that the member has expressed and many other members have expressed, is that I am now glad to see cross-party support for culture and arts, not only for now but going forward. I am cynical about where some of that support comes from. However, I am determined and committed to ensure that not only the 32 funded groups but others who are there and others who have yet to come need to be supported as we go forward. I don't believe anybody would argue against the fact, or even regardless of where they come from politically, would even try to argue against the fact that in living memory we are facing the worst impacts of Tory austerity. The fact that we didn't have a monitoring round in the summer, which, along with other colleagues in the executive, I have had opportunities to build for pressures and certainly for priorities in the past. It's added to a situation that, frankly, isn't good. But what I will do, and I am committed to doing, and I spoke at Basil's invitation to some of the people who come up on Tuesday, I promise to be evangelical about this strategy. I will go out with this strategy in the same way I did with others. I will encourage people to participate and feed into it. I will try to ensure, not only do I do it in the community, but I think it was Rosaleen had asked, will I engage other colleagues? And if I can, I will. But I will be arguing as best as I possibly can, not just for culture and arts, but for other priorities in the department that I believe actually have a great impact on improving the lives of our citizens from across the community. And I can do no less than that. I know I'm competing with others, I'm competing with health, I'm competing with the rest. That's okay, that's my job.
But you do, the remit of the culture, arts and leisure falls into so many departments here, and the value of that shouldn't be taken away. And I don't want the cost of everything to be on the lips, and everybody getting the understanding of the cost of everything. It should be the value of everything.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And not make it the value of nothing.
Absolutely.
And that's very, very important for the arts. But on the World Police and Fire Games fund and that £500,000 fund, you know, like, I do have some issues with it, and I know Belfast was the host council, but there was a lot of our councils did participate and stepped up to the mark to help deliver through venues, etc., for the World Police and Fire Games. And I was just a wee bit disappointed, maybe in learning, and maybe I'm a bit late in saying it, but I have to say it, that, you know, they weren't given the opportunity to tap into that £500,000 fund. But, you know, if there's going to be something there in the future for it, because we do have to live in the legacy of delivering for the future of tourism and sport, to the future of our arts and all. They all have to be more joined up thinking now, particularly around the funding. And I do welcome the fact that I want confirmation of this, that you said the strategy for the arts and culture will be launched in 3 weeks. Is that correct?
Yes.
And with the terms of reference for that strategy, what protections for our arts groups, and including in sports as well, will be put in place? What advice, what feelers are you going to be put out on that?
Well, first of all, we're still completing, but it's really around themes and emerging needs that have been across culture and arts over a period of years. Certainly, I think the argument, if we can capitalise on the emotion that people feel about and the commitment to culture and arts now, I think it will be a very strong and robust strategy. I appreciate the remarks you made about councillors as part of World Police and Fire Games, and I'm not being political when I say this, but nobody else asked, nobody else lobbied. It's like every great idea when it happened, Fila and Fubble, along with their partners, were very open and transparent about lobbying for this. They've seen the potential, they've seen the great idea, and others appreciated that afterwards. And indeed, one of the generous aspects of our culture and arts groups out there, they're not criticising that partnership for getting additional money. In fact, they support it and welcome it. But is there need and there are opportunities where we all could feed in better in the future? Absolutely. And I believe that even local councils, not just around the Communities Festival Fund, but even in terms of how they can attract visitors to their towns and cities, and indeed some of the villages. Local councils should have a very good role to play in the formulation of the strategy and indeed the outcome, because I believe when we join up more of our spend, we join up more of our ideas and our support, the outcome for arts and culture will be much better and much more sustainable in the future. And I do appreciate this, and I know every member does, the situation that we're in regarding cuts that are coming down the road from the British government. I mean, it really is terrifying, but I still have to make the case for the culture and arts.
Well, you did allow...
I know. You'll get back another go later on. You get another go. Don't worry. We'll get a full go. Basil McCrae.
Thank you, Minister. And I was... you did acknowledge, and I put it back to you, I thought it was a good thing that you met with the people that come up and the processes come up, and I think they'll be gratified by that. So I think that's a really good job, and well done on that. There are a few questions that I want to ask you, not in an aggressive manner, but just as a way of seeing if we can actually understand a few things. Now, you can say, well, actually, this is my opinion, and that's okay.
Fair enough.
But there was an issue when we were looking at the the World Police and Fire Games, where you made the case that there was a particular requirement in 2013, and you went and you got a business case and you got money or whatever. Yeah. But you say in this document that you thought there was a need for a continuation into the following year. I'm not clear why you would make that statement.
Well, the success of 2013 actually helped not only build upon relationships and partnerships that people had, but also pointed out the need that that's the sort of work that some of those partners want to do in the future. And I believe, and I am encouraging people to come together in terms of partnerships, because I believe there's a better outcome. And that's why in 2014 we supported a bid, and again in 2015, because that partnership has grown. And for me, that's a good outcome and a good legacy from 2013.
Was that bid, though, the 2013, I absolutely agree. In fact, I do remember the context that a lot of people were not sure whether the World Police and Fire Games was going to work or whatever.
Correct.
And so, actually, when it was a great success, everyone, oh, well, I was right behind you the whole time.
Yeah.
So, I do understand it was a little tricky. But the 2014, the follow-on year, did you have to apply for an additional in-year monitoring bid for that, or did you take that money for that second year out of existing funds?
No, that was all applied for through monitoring round bids.
So there was an additional sum of money came back in that. One of the things that you say in your letter is that in 2013 the department administered the fund, but in the subsequent year it was the West Belfast Failure administered.
Why is that?
Yes.
Well, in 2013, I mean, this was new, and certainly after the post-project evaluation, and certainly in terms of due diligence and the governance, we were quite confident and content that Phil and Fubble could do this as a lead partner on behalf of the other cultural partners. And apart from anything else, I had 25 years' experience of doing this.
I'm just wondering about the costs that were associated with the administration in the second year. Would you have, because obviously the grant was 200,000, but the money was then shared out. But how much money did the Filia take to administer the fund?
Certainly, I know in terms of I'll get the figure here, but the rationale for it...
It's okay, okay,
No, the rationale for it was that, I mean, as a lead partner, they had worked out, for example, they worked out in terms of the programme evaluation, the programme planning, preparation for workshops, preparation for events. They took the lead in all that and actually worked it out on the basis of that. And, I mean, that has been the case ever since.
Well, I said if we were looking though at the sum of the money, I'm not saying that they couldn't do it. And in fact, I support, for what it's worth, I know what the pressures were like in 2013, and it's a question of can you find organisations with the capacity to deliver and short term. It's not forgotten me, and I know that they are one of them. And I made that point actually in the previous committee meeting, as I understood why you do that. But there's then an issue about, okay, so we're going to do it the next year, and previously the cost of administering that fund would have been absorbed by the department, but now they're being delivered by the failure, and I think they're getting, I don't know if you've got the figure yet, but it's somewhere around about, maybe Janice knows what the figure is.
I haven't got the specific figure in front of me, I think.
Just the total figure.
Well, I mean, the total.
No, I think you're talking about the administration costs. I haven't. Sorry, I should have the specific figure. I don't have the specific figure in front of me, but I'm happy to follow up.
Well,
I believe it was of the order of 11%, but I need to check that.
Well, I'm happy just to leave it with you. But
Sure.
the point is that whilst it was a good idea, and nobody is denying that it was a good idea to carry on and do good things, the knock-on effect has been an effect of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Exercise, the Minister has made clear that she would like a greater budget, and I can assure you that I totally support you in that, and that is something that I think the case can be. And actually, just say for the record, so I only got a few minutes, I don't have a problem with you having ministerial priorities.
No, I understand that.
What the question is there's a feeling about lack of lack of transparency, because although we can all tick the box and we can say, oh yes, it went through the executive and did this and that, frankly, Minister, we'll get so much paper, we'll get so much things that sometimes you don't really, you might have gone through the process, but you don't really understand it. And what I'm encouraging you to do, and I know that you've given it, is if you can explain the pressures that you're under, it makes it easier for us to come along and say we need to either argue for more funding or explain to people.
Okay, I have to cut in there. Leslie Cree.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, I've read this carefully now, and I can see a line of using the legacy has been something very important carrying going forward. Do you accept that that legacy may not always be able to be afforded?
Well, I accept that there are many things and many pressures that have been brought to the department that the money isn't there for, but legacy isn't one of them. And certainly, I believe even in terms of the legacy of the City of Culture, particularly going from the City of Derry right throughout surrounding counties and countrysides, it's been very, very important, because while they all wished the City of Derry all the very best in 2013, and genuinely they did, but your people, for example, in Cahill's constituency and others, who were saying, while we went and participated in some events, we felt a wee bit like we want some of this. And that's what happened. And that's what's continued to happen.
And therefore it can spread quite a bit as well.
It can. So the legacy has to have a ripple effect. That is the point of it. It's not just a ripple effect for the small group who got in the first instance, but basically about trying to reach out to others who didn't have the opportunities.
But do you accept the point we may not have the money for it?
Well, I accept the point that the money we'll have will make priorities. And sometimes I make priorities you don't agree with. And that's the nature of politics. That is the nature of politics.
So, funding legacy issues are not sacrosanct then? Or are they sacrosanct?
Well, funding priorities that actually help tackle social exclusion, and funding priorities that actually help promote equality and access of opportunity, for me, are not only very important, but they're a commitment, and those commitments are something that I intend to bring forward into the strategy, for example, for culture and arts for the next years ahead.
Thanks for that. Well, one of the complaints that I got the other day with the people who were up here was that the arts were getting hit, but they said, for example, what about the Irish language and culture? How much is it being reduced? Do you have a figure for that?
Not offhand, but I'll get it for you. But I understand when people are challenged financially, they start looking at other examples. But when I talk to my constituents who ask me why I'm plowing millions of pounds, £75 million into the arts, why can't it not be put in for cancer drugs for their relatives? I'll stand up for the arts and try and support them and their relatives as much as possible.
Well, competing priorities, of course.
But I don't accept the premise around the Irish language. I think it's just too handy for people to kick.
No, but...
And I appreciate you're not doing that. And I appreciate maybe even if people raised it with you, that's not their intention. But for me, it's a priority. And it's not only a priority, it's a duty. It's part of my ministerial responsibility to for Irish language and Ulster Scots culture and heritage.
Well, could you provide a figure? Because I was looking
No,
at this.
I'll get you a figure.
Okay, thank you. Chair.
Okay. Let me just pose a couple of questions here. You said at the start that the Department received a proposal in 2013 for a cultural programme, and a business case was developed. It refers in your letter to iterations and consultations. So who actually wrote the business case?
It would have been Feel and Fubble in conjunction, yeah.
Yes, and then...
Yeah.
There were
In conjunction?
There were 3 business cases. There was
Yes,
business
I
case
appreciate
from,
that, but for all of them, who actually wrote them?
Feel and Fubble.
Feel and Fubble wrote all of them?
And,
Right, okay. That's fine. Secondly, it says in one of the business case for the bill that there refers to their relationship with the Ulster Scots Agency. How much money did the Ulster Scots Agency get out of that package of funding? You mentioned a shipbuilding exhibition.
Yeah.
I've no figure how much the shipbuilding exhibition cost, but I'll certainly get you that figure as well.
Well, it was actually paid for out of their own budget because there was no money, as I understand it, went not one penny to them. So the other thing here, just the point is being made about Tory austerity and its impact on the arts sector. Is it not the case that by taking money away from 32 organisations and other projects and giving it to other people, what you're doing, it's not Tory austerity, this is simply Sinn Féin priorities, or your priorities.
Well,
You've reprioritised
are you acknowledging that there isn't Tory austerity?
No, I didn't say that.
Are you not acknowledging that?
Sorry, Minister. No, we're not talking about my views on things. I'm asking you. Would you acknowledge that this is actually this is a reallocation of money? It's a reallocation of money that you have. You've taken away from one to give it to another.
Would you like me to answer your question?
Well, just to make the question absolutely clear, so we get an answer that's relevant. In terms of the money being shifted across from A to B, is that not a case of reprioritising? So it's about priorities, not austerity.
First of all, your premise is wrong. There is Tory austerity. We have.
I didn't say there wasn't.
Could I finish answering my question, please?
I wanted to make sure I got.
Could I finish answering my question, please?
Sorry, Minister, please. Just don't put words in my mouth that weren't there. I did not say there wasn't Tory austerity. Everybody knows there is.
It's a pity I couldn't put words in your mouth, Chair. You might have a bit
more respect from you,
a bit
Minister,
more respect.
Please,
you might have a bit more manners.
It is demeaning to you, Minister, and degrading to you to behave in that manner. Now, we'll move on.
Could I answer the question, please?
Yes, please.
We have lost £10 million, 10% of our budget as a result of Tory austerity. That's a fact.
Yeah,
I have made priorities, if I could answer the question, please. I have reprioritised money within my department in absence of a June monitoring round as a result of competing pressures in my department.
Yeah. Just one more question then. Do you also, as well as a cultural programme, you have a rural cultural programme? Are you familiar with that?
There was a rural area included as part of a cultural partnership.
No, there was a thing there on the grant finder database for the executive. It refers to the rural cultural programme as a funding programme. Now, when I downloaded that, I found that in 1 year only did it exist within your department, and that was the year of 14-15. In the rural cultural programme, there seemed to have been only 2 applications. Both came from the one organisation. It was never advertised, and the total sum of £50,000 for installation of a heat retention system and a replacement heating system. So £50,000 roughly went to one organisation through a programme that was for rural Northern Ireland. Why is it that that wasn't open up to others?
Well, I think the way in which it has been presented, to be honest, has been misleading. It was £50,000. I take it you're talking about T. Cullen?
Yes, you're familiar with it. That's good.
T. Cullen for a heating system. So it should have been just put down as an arts provider that needed £50,000 for a heating system. It's been presented wrongly, in my opinion.
No, but this, this says quite clearly, your department has put onto the government executive database that there was a funding programme, and it states specifically there have been 2 grants made against this funding programme.
One for 50,000 and
Well,
the other...
no, sorry, the two together make up 50,000.
Okay.
One is installation of a retention system, one's replacement. So why was that not opened up for other people in other halls across Northern Ireland? Why was it never advertised? Why was it that one organisation alone is the recipient of the generosity of the department in that way? They seem to be the only people who knew about this fund.
Well, in fact, that's actually not the case. I mean, other grants and other bodies have came forward just for funds for many things that aren't...
That programme, that's how it's recorded. When I went to that section on the database, that's all it mentions.
Well, first of all, and if I could please answer the question. First of all, the way in which that's been presented, in my opinion, is misleading, because you clearly feel that it's something that isn't in keeping with what the department has done elsewhere. For example, monies that were provided...
But sorry, this refers to a programme.
Well, it shouldn't have.
Well, then you need to correct that.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Well,
if
yes,
you let me answer the question.
But correct, please, on the database, because then we'll
I will,
find
surely.
out. Yeah, that's fine.
I will.
Just to ask also, quickly, Ardoyne Community Association received £10,000 in 2014-15. What is the Ardoyne Community Association? What was it for?
It's one of the cultural partners. They're a group of people who...
What was it used for?
It was festival activities.
Festival activity in Ardoyne?
Yes.
In 2014?
Well, it would have been around. I mean, there's a few different festivals. It's not just the one that you hear in the summer.
Which one is this for? Somebody must have, of course, the receipts would have gone back to Filian Phobal.
Well, this is around building capacity of a group of residents who are involved through the Community Association, who have partnerships with Ardoyne FLA, Grace Women's Centre, Ardoyne Youth Club, about building their capacity to help participate in events around festivals.
Could you return to us in writing what that £10,000 went towards?
Happy to get you that breakdown.
Interesting to say. Would any of it have gone to the Ardoyne FLA?
The Ardoyne FLA would have been involved in the capacity building around this fund. They're one of the partners in the Community Association. Why wouldn't it?
I think others may want to come back to that in due course. Rosie McCormick.
All right, are we in your second round?
Your second round.
Right, okay.
Yes, it's all over the place, but it is supposed to be festivals this time.
Okay. Well, Guramayagat, Arish,
To be clear, have we moved on to the second?
Well, we have, but we're not being rigid because the Minister's presentation at the beginning covered both, so it is difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, can I ask a point of order, Chair?
Yes.
How much time do you get to speak at these meetings?
I'll chair it. We're wasting time with the Minister if we discuss that later. Rosie McCormick.
August Guramayagat, Arish, Ira, thanks again, Minister. In terms of the fund which was supplied to Filian Phobal, was any of this money spent on projects, or was the money spent on projects alone, or was it spent otherwise, or was it retained otherwise? So what I'm trying to ask is, what way was this money used? Because it's a very controversial piece of funding, so I think clarity around that would be...
Well, I don't believe it is controversial, to be honest. I believe other people have made it controversial for political reasons.
Well, I suppose that was...
Yeah, no, and I understand that's what you mean, but I mean, I want to put that on the record. I mean, the cultural partnership from 2013, 2014 and indeed 2015, I believe has been one of the most empowering examples of community inclusion, and there are many others out there outside of that partnership. But certainly for people, particularly in Belfast, and I'll give you an example. In 2013, the Workplace and Fire Games were having a very successful cultural programme. Round the corner in Royal Avenue, loyalists decided to attack the PSNI.
I don't think
excuse
that
me,
that is particular. Sorry, Minister,
I'm answering the member's question.
I think that what happened, and I don't even know what the event particularly was, I think the key thing is to actually... Sorry, please.
Excuse me.
Please,
sorry,
just all round, please.
Sorry, can I make a point here?
Please, could just, for a moment. we have a limited amount of time. It is disrespectful to the arts if we get into discussion about what happened somewhere on some other day. Please.
I'm
Cynthia,
happy to hear what
Yes.
Minister has to say on that.
Well, I think it's for you to decide if you're happy to hear this.
We need to chair.
The issue is that the role in which those communities played, particularly when services were under pressure, huge pressure, I believe was exemplary. I also believe that the services themselves who participated in the cultural programme, so with PSNI officers, for example, in Falls Park as part of Field and Football, along with groups of people from all parts of the city, and I believe that's the sort of investment that we need to make. So I appreciate the way in which you put it, the context. Others have made this controversial. I think this is something which we all can add to and build on for future years.
No, and I think it's unfortunate that it can get portrayed as or made to be controversial. Shouldn't be, because it's about delivering for people who are living in need and people who are disadvantaged and all of that. So just in that respect, are you content then that the people, the target audience that you wanted to reach with the cultural programme, that it is doing that, and that festival funding in general does that?
I believe the target audience has been met and then some. I believe this is an example where, when we look at the new strategy that we'll bring forward for consultation, that is something we can build upon. There are many examples, apart from the cultural partnership that we're focusing on, there are many examples of great festivals right across the north and indeed across the island that do help regenerate the economy, do help include people, help employment within the arts sector. And some of the people within the arts sector are the worst paid of any sector. I don't see people jumping up and down about that. And certainly we need sustainability for those artists, creative people and indeed creative communities. And I think this is an example of what we can do, add to it and then build upon it for the future.
Okay, final question. Just, I also sit in the Health Committee, and we've had a lot of focus on mental health issues recently, and there's a big suicide prevention sort of issue as well. Could you comment on whether that funding then assists in those issues around mental health? Because there's lots of commentary around how people with mental health issues can be assisted. So would your funding then go to assist people then who have those kind of issues?
Well, certainly the Arts Council, in my opinion, have done some very excellent work throughout the years. I mean, they've used art particularly with older people, working with some of the dementia groups, certainly working with young people through photography programmes. I've visited some of the exhibitions who, for some of them, have been experiencing self-harm for years, who were suicidal, who were mentally unwell, who felt completely excluded and needed support. Some of the groups within the communities and indeed across the sectors came together around exhibitions, but even the artworks within the prisons. And certainly I have met with people who are working within health and social services, and some of the children and young people who are looked after in care have been helped through these programmes and indeed through programmes from the arts. I know the Minister is supportive of having a conversation around what we can do more of, particularly even if there are opportunities around Together Building United Communities programmes, that we can particularly look at children who are looked after in care and look at people who are experiencing massive challenges around mental health and wellbeing. So I think all this can lend itself to the work of many departments if we take a collaborative approach.
Okay, so it's very far-reaching benefits.
Very far-reaching benefits.
Gordon Dunn.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again, Minister, for your input. Just quickly, in relation to the spread of expenditure across Northern Ireland, how do you manage the equality issue in relation to geography and various communities? When we look at the letter that you've given us, dated the 4th of November, in relation to festival funding, to me the vast majority of, in fact all of it that is listed, is all in Belfast. So why is it all centred just around Belfast? Or certainly seems to be top heavy in relation to funding for Belfast. How does that fit in with your criteria in relation to equality, in relation to geography and the various communities throughout Northern Ireland?
Okay, well, first of all, the top 10% of the most deprived wards are in Belfast. That's not to say there isn't deprivation in rural communities or areas, there are. But certainly the top 10% of the most deprived wards are certainly in North and West Belfast. It was no coincidence then, therefore, that those cultural partnerships emerged and some of the thoughts and ideas emerged from within those areas. But they've been working with groups. Indeed, we work with groups as a result of, the gathering in Lisburn was attended by 4,500 people. We now have a cultural partner in the programme in terms of T. Cullen and South Armagh, in terms of the rural area for Newry and South Armagh, Newry, and indeed Newry and Moore. And we've been working with others. I was down in, certainly down in Newcastle, and met some of the other groups who are involved in some of the cultural work. I was in the city of Newry, talking to some of the cultural partners about any potential in the future. They don't begrudge the groups in Belfast getting it, they welcome it, but just as you pointed out, we'd like to see future opportunities for them to avail of funds to provide festivals and cultural activities as well.
Okay, it doesn't seem, you didn't touch on many unionist areas there, I noticed. Or is that obviously the Minister's priority as to where funding goes?
Well, I think that's a complete disgrace. I think it's an absolute disgrace that you've accused me of being sectarian.
Well, sorry.
No, I didn't.
Please just answer the question.
The Minister's priority, we're told earlier that about ministerial priorities. So the areas that you've covered have made the point that you didn't seem to touch unionist
Okay,
areas.
well, can I just give you an example then? In 2014-15, this included a number of interventions that we have made, that I have made. Certainly, for the want of a better term, Protestant Unionist Loyalist areas example, the Tartan play by etc. Theatre Company received £46,000. Eastside Arts Strategy £68,000, as well as the Beat Carnival Centre in the Lower Shankill £380,000. And furthermore, during my time in DCAL, we have found a range of interventions in the Ulster Scots, including funding for the Ulster Scots Community Network, the Ulster Scots groups, fiddle classes, the WF Marshall Winter School. We also funded key marginalised groups, including the Bounce Festival with arts and disability groups, and the Up Replay as well, just as an example of some of the interventions I made. Now, what else does a member suggest? When we're presenting with need and presented with a proposal, I'm sure the member will agree that once those proposals are presented to me, I have, in a very genuine and open way, considered them, and on occasions of the examples that I've just outlined, have invested in them also. So I think the allegation that I'm just looking after certain areas in Belfast is completely unfounded.
Well, the list that we have been given here of your letter, dated the 4th of November, does not include those.
Well, I'm happy to furnish the member and other committees, members of the committee with those details.
Why are they not included?
Maybe, Minister, if I could clarify, I think perhaps, Mr Dunn, the letter you're referring to is the letter which is focused on the cultural programme. Specifically, the Minister has given examples of a number of areas where there have been interventions to focus right across Northern Ireland. And I think also in terms of the cultural programme for 2015-16, as the Minister said, there's a rural partner, and that partner is to partner with an organisation, let's say, and I don't like using the phrase, on the other side of the community. So they will be taken forward.
It's a cross-community rural programme.
It's a cross-community programme.
But it's not included in this.
But
it has been included in, I think the letter you have is given information on 2013-14 and 14-15, if I'm perhaps looking at the right.
It didn't ask for 15-16.
In 15-16, for the first time, we do have an organisation, a rural organisation, and it will be partnering on a cross-community basis with another organisation to take forward some projects.
Right, we'll look forward to that. Obviously, it hasn't been included.
William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, Minister, can I just go back to the answer you gave to the Minister about the £10,000 the Ardoyne Community Association? You mentioned Ardoyne Fleadh as part of that in terms of capacity building, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So Ardoyne Fleadh benefited from that?
As did all the partners under that community association. Okay. Ardoyne Fleadh would have been one of the partners.
Okay. Why then, whenever I asked you a question in the House on the 16th of September 2014, and any money going from the department to the Fleadh, you said no?
Because it didn't directly go to the Fleadh for the Fleadh. That's a question that you asked me.
Ah, right.
If you ask me a question, I'll give you an answer. I mean, I'm very consistent.
Well, I did that, to be honest, could have been part of the answer. Because it did. Money did go to the FLA.
Did you ask for
From your
funding for
department,
the FLA?
money-
You
money-
asked for funding for the FLA,
Sorry,
which is completely different.
Money from your department went to the FLA, and my question was, had any money gone from your department to the FLA? And you said no. So that's not accurate. You misled the House.
Absolutely did not.
You certainly did.
Absolutely didn't.
Can I then ask, in terms of the cuts, and in terms of the issue we're facing here in relation to the organisations that receive funding through the cultural programme for the 2 years. 13-14 Phil and Phobal got 254,000, McCracken Cultural Society 115,000, the Belfast Film Festival 110,000. That money was administered according to your letter by the department. The following year then, 2014-15, which is the money that went to Phil and Phobal, Arts Extra, the Spectrum, Belfast Festival, that was administered by the FELA. Why, in either of those years, was the Arts Council not administering that money?
Because this was an intervention from my department. I mean, like many other interventions that my department have made, particularly in this case where there is a lead partner working on behalf of the partnership, taking responsibility. By all the groups bring forward the proposals, they actually bring the overall business cases of each of the groups together and then present them to the department.
Okay.
So that's why it's fairly straightforward. Basil asked that question earlier.
Oh, no, we did. I heard and I listened. Can I ask you then, Mr McMahon, in relation to that monies, why does your department allow money to go to an organisation that isn't part of the Decal family and circumvent, and in my view undermine, the Arts Council to have that money, 350,000 in 2014-15 by FELA, when you have a part of your own body, your arm's length body doing it?
Well, I think there's a couple of things in that. The first thing is it is not. There's a number of different routes through which funding can go out from departments, and that happens all the time. There are on many occasions departments will use open competitions or open calls. However, departments will also use specific programmes with specific organisations where that's appropriate. For example, we're currently speaking with the Lennon Hall Library at the moment about a particular issue.
So, in relation to probity and policy, you're content with that?
I'm content that we do use a number of funding routes to ensure that.
But I've asked you specifically: are you content that it went to FELA and not through the Arts Council?
Yes.
Right. Can I then ask, in terms of to Cullen, their cross-community partner that Tricia was talking about, the rural connectivity and so on. Who's the cross-community partner for Cullen?
I don't have that information, but I'm happy to.
Could you furnish it?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hutching.
Thank you, Chair. There are conservative estimates of the success of the City of Culture is that somewhere in the region of over 1 million people actually visited the city during the course of that year. I think that's conservative because during the week of Blackhill and the Heron, the estimate was somewhere in the region of 500,000. But the point I'm making about the City of Culture year is that was a relatively modest investment of some £12 million to be followed up then subsequently with a further legacy investment. And you're right that be spread across a wider area, because when the City of Culture was being formulated, the applications for participation were from right across the wider area, and they went right across the north. So I welcomed and appreciate why that investment, particularly in legacy, is coming. I wish that other programmes would have the same legacy type investment. You rightly point out that the 10 most deprived wards are in Belfast, and you are right on that. But there are also 2 of the most deprived wards are in rural areas, in my constituency of Coleston and Greystone in the Valley. And I'm glad that my constituency and with wider West Tyrone and North Antrim and Mid-Ulster and elsewhere are all benefiting from that. But you touched upon some of the interventions that you did earlier, that you had done earlier. And I'm just wondering, have any of those interventions been in the wider, particularly rural areas of the north and particularly in the west?
Well, certainly, I mean, it's in Karen's constituency, the group Sticky Fingers. I mean, not even these workers just known in Newry and Mourne, but in fairness to them, their work, particularly they did around the citizenship of children and young people, has been fairly widespread. Some of the work that we've done through the Legacy programme, and Joanna can give more details on this, but certainly the work, I met the Stent Hall Festival people, come back some time, very, very impressed with them. I also met Paddy Glasgow, which most people know of if they haven't met him. But certainly, and many of the small, very, very small projects, even throughout the Northwest, even in Strabane, you know, a very, very small arts programme around minority ethnic groups and the value that they explained that meant for them, and the fact that they were able to access that support through Legacy. But certainly, Joanna, he lived and breathed more than I did in that city and surrounding area for here to Tim have more of the detail.
Well, look, I mean, the committee's aware that I'm undertaking a fairly substantial piece of work at the moment to look at some of the figures around City of Culture, and we're obviously working with Council as well in terms of finalising the post-project evaluation for 2013 and finalising our own post-project evaluation for the legacy work that we've been doing. But just one of the figures that might be interesting in this context is the fact that of the legacy funding that DCAL has invested in the Northwest, the breakdown is actually that in Derry, Strabane, we spent something in the region of £15 per person, and in the Coleraine and Limavady areas spent more. We spent £17 per person, and I think that highlights the fact that we did as much as possible to spread the good benefits that came from City of Culture, which were very much concentrated in the Derry and Strabane area, to the wider Northwest, which was the objective of City of Culture, and that's borne out, as I say, in the fact that Limavady and Coleraine residents, through their councils, we're aware, felt that they benefited less from City of Culture during the year, and yet we've spent more on those areas as part of the Legacy programme. But also just to give a couple of examples of projects that were born out of City of Culture and came from Londonderry in 2013 but are now stretching right across Northern Ireland. The Verbal Arts Centre, which I think we've mentioned quite a few times but is an excellent example. They've got over 60 reading rooms projects now. It was a project which grew out of 2013, and they are still in the Northwest, in Strabane and Limavady, and Dungiven, but they're also in Newry, in White Abbey, in Belfast and Cookstown. Culture Tech have been delivering additional outreach right across the Northwest and throughout Northern Ireland. So that's the Seagate Codebreaker Challenge, My Science Shorts project with BBC Northern Ireland. They're supporting partnerships with the Northern Ireland Science Festival, which is based in Belfast, and the Minecraft Edu project, which is available to every post-primary school in the north. The Nerve Centre we've mentioned lots of times as well. They're all over the place, doing things with prisons, with Foyle Down Syndrome Trust. They're working right across Northern Ireland in the Ulster American Folk Park. I could go on because we, in terms of our legacy funding with organisations who were involved in City of Culture, one of the key criteria was how are you going to spread your programme in terms of greater capacity for your organisation or greater geographical reach, because we didn't want to keep concentrating the benefits in the Northwest. And it was very much about opportunity, and I think this is something about the inescapable nature of it, that if we had not continued to fund the legacy of City of Culture, we know from international research that we would be unlikely to reach the longer term targets of economic impact, not just for the city that hosted the title, but for the entire region.
Well, thank you, Chair. At a time when there's a lot of negativity coming out of this committee and maybe even out of this building, it is good to shout about the successes that have been and are continuing to be right across the north. So thank you.
Oliver McMullen.
Yes, sir. Can as much as possible, Minister, can you ensure that that access to culture and the arts groups like disabilities, deprived communities, rural communities, are highlighted and prioritised in any consultation.
Yes.
That can be done as much as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, even the work of certainly the Disability Arts Forum isn't just based in Belfast. It represents people from right across the north. Certainly, yes. And indeed, even in terms of rural communities, and I think it was in response to part of the question, the answer to Karen McKevitt, that even I think the councils, particularly now that they've all been gone through RPA, the new councils have a great opportunity, in my opinion, to try and put forward a better representation of services and support from right across our areas. And indeed, I would argue that they need to add to them, because sometimes a project can either stand or fall on the basis of some money it receives, and sometimes all it needs is a small amount of money that in the past has meant that the viability of the programme has actually happened. Also, in terms of the way in which we engage and participate in arts and culture is different to where people live, and I think that needs to be reflective and reflected in the strategy.
And just lastly, would you agree with me that in rural areas that the councils will have a big role in their community plans to engage as many people in the arts programmes as possible, and this will go a long way in doing away with this thinking of the unionist nationalists being kept out of funding, that these groups now have, and their political representatives now have a chance to feed into the community plans within councils.
Well, yes, absolutely. The way in which councils have been reformed should ensure that there's better opportunities for constituents, ratepayers to feed into consultations. But it's not the council's responsibility alone, it's all our responsibility as a council. Certainly could be a very strong advocate for arts and culture within their council boundaries. I know there are others out there, and there's others who have yet to come forward, but I believe the role that councils can play, particularly during this consultation, is very, very important.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen McKevitt.
Thanks very much, Chair. Maybe because T. Cullen isn't in Erie Mourne area, I would like to take this opportunity maybe to ask the committee to consider a visit down to T. Cullen. It is a cultural events and accommodation centre, and I've no doubt they will receive a warm welcome if it were to take that up. Minister, when the Arts Council were here making the presentation just before you, they did speak about the meeting that they had with you and how it was your prerogative to make tough decisions, and they totally respected that. In your own presentation, you did talk about that meeting with the Arts Council and how you have received some evidence which was very helpful. Straight up, because you've received the evidence now from the decision, is there any chance that you're going to change your mind of some of these cuts?
Well, straight up, if the budget changes, I'll certainly consider it. But again, I still think that, I'm not saying the member is part of this denial, but there is almost a denial that we haven't faced the cuts that we have. We absolutely have. We had a very robust and frank and open meeting with the Arts Council. I'm sure they said the same thing. I have nothing but time and respect in the way in which they've done it under very difficult circumstances. We didn't agree. We didn't agree in some things and agreed in many things. And one of the things I couldn't give them the commitment is an absence of a monitoring round or an absence of additional support in the context that we're in. I can't give guarantees. However, if the financial situation changed, I would certainly have another look at it, because there are bids that are sitting there from June, and again, emergent additional pressures that are added to that I believe could be part of a bid in the event that a monitoring round was open to us. But I think the member would understand this. I think it's reckless for me to promise something I can't deliver on, and I can't do that. I just can't do that.
Yeah, it's just I think what they come across this morning, certainly to me, in some of the replies that they give, was that they're trying to support the community-based arts organisations which have been delivering high-quality programmes are trying to finish high quality programmes, which has taken years to develop, and you're never going to be able to assess the can't think of the word that's gone. You're never going to be able to assess that within the community and the benefits of that. And a lot of money has already been spent on that. And in your in the resources and your inequitable pressures and what's been put to your high priority pressures and then in table 3 you're talking about inescapable pressures, you know, and all of those are similar pressures, but you're going to be able to assess those in spending that money, but yet the value of what the arts deliver in communities is going to be lost with that funding cut, and it's very hard to take in when I'm looking at I just can't find it here in this thing. It's on LED light replacement, you know, when you're looking about spending 130 something thousand from memory to change LED lights to LED light low energy at 130 something thousand. Where that 130 something thousand could turn into millions.
I appreciate the member's point, and
I'm not saying it's not important to change low energy or anything like that. I'm trying to balance.
I understand the point you're making. There are times I've received bids from some of the ALBs and have interrogated the figures and have interrogated the rationale for it, and could it not be done in a less expensive way somewhere else. And it is a judgment call. I mean, the 32 groups, and I'm sure the Arts Council said this, they're receiving well over £8 million a year. They actually need more money. They've needed more money for a long time. And unless we get a genuine cross-party support, I'm not saying that everybody's going to say there's a blank cheque here. And I don't think that's what's been asked for either. It certainly hasn't been. But to get cross-party support for a vibrant arts sector and a vibrant culture sector is going to cost this executive, and we need to get real about what that cost is. In addition to that, I've asked my ALBs when they're putting bids in, and they already know, the bids will be scrutinised, there will be questions asked, there will be asked for other examples where it could be done maybe for better value elsewhere. But I also have to take what they're saying at face value, because I have to be fair to them. They do a good job in very difficult circumstances, and they wouldn't be asking for something if it wasn't really needed. That's my experience.
Basil McCrae.
Minister, does the Arts Council still enjoy your confidence?
It does.
Could you explain why you felt it appropriate to cut their budget by £870,000 and enhance other budgets by £500,000?
Well, for example, as I said in my opening statement, that the percentage certainly was the same for sports, albeit the figure was higher for arts. Even within DCAL, we've taken a 7% reduction in our budget. And the member will be aware of the priority I placed on trying to save libraries as much as possible, but they also had a reduction of £320,000. And it is regrettable that I and other ministers are forced to make decisions in this context. And I think, I mean, even the alarm of the statement coming from the British government in the summer of additional hundreds of millions of pounds, it is really important that we do try and get a good, robust, well-resourced strategy that will stand not only through the duration of the remainder of this mandate, but certainly stand.
Minister, I mean, I'm in agreement with you, and I want to try and bring some things in a positive way forward. Because there is a bit of an issue that people were transferring money away to something else, and that's somehow not right. But some of that money went to the North West funding. Was it unhelpful to you that you didn't have funding in the baseline for after March 2015? In other words, there was, because you were criticised by Colin Eastwood for an apparent failure to support legacy funding afterwards, but of course you didn't have baseline figure to do that.
And I still don't, in theory, and that's the point I'm making. I mean, and I think that's the point you're making.
Correct.
The budget isn't here, but do we stop doing the work because we haven't got the budget? There are certain things that I have done at risk.
So I just think it is. So I think it is helpful if we're a bit more open and transparent, because I don't think people understood the pressures that the department was under in that regard.
And we have, including the cultural programme and including TBUC and including the legacy, we have almost £2 million of pressures that we have to meet within the department.
Yep. So I get that, and I'm trying to help you to pull that out. Can I come back to some of the points that Joanna mentioned, though? Just we've heard it a couple of times about, oh, that's not properly described, or that's not right in the database. I mean, even whenever we talk about the perceived injustice that the North West spread of money got, some of the money in Coleraine went to a sports village, which it's not clearly identified, even though the funding line will have been that's come from legacy funding. The citizen will not immediately look at that and go, oh yes, that's to do with the UK City of Culture. And I just wonder if there is a case for more appropriate labelling and explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this goes back to the debate that we've been having in terms of what is and isn't City of Culture legacy and how people make that distinction. But for us, it's easier within DCAL. It's where there has been an opportunity created by the capacity that was built during 2013.
But you know the point I make when you said it was £15 per person for Derry and £17 per person. You might understand that departmental speak, but I just think we need to do a bit more about explaining this.
I think that's a fair enough point.
Yeah. So, just looking at the timing on this, because you've raised the point, I do think it is really important. I think there's an opportunity to pull people together in this, that we are not trying to do down people that are doing really good work in community outreach. And one of the things that the protesters came up and said to me about arts in general is that the funding I don't know where they got their figures from, but their figures were, we spend £14 million on this activity and the payback is £743 million in terms of added economic activity or whatever. And I just would wish you every success in trying to explain to executive colleagues, and indeed those of us that are not in the executive, that arts do matter and that we do need to fund it properly. Otherwise, we're forever into trying to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Well, I appreciate your... Can I come back on that, Chair? I appreciate your support and appreciate your comments. I too would like to know how that figure was reached, because I've seen a few figures, but irrespective, they are substantial figures and millions of pounds of investment that's returned back into cities, villages and communities as a result of investment in culture and arts. And I think that's something that hopefully will be reflected much better in the strategy, because we need to provide an argument for those who are unconvinced of the importance that it actually does make economic sense. But as well as that, I'm also trying to get a figure for people who haven't engaged or aren't involved in arts and culture, what the cost of the health service would be, what the cost of the education service would be, what the cost of the criminal justice system would be, and so on, and what the cost of society would be. And I think that too often, as Karen pointed out, certain figures are rolled off people's lips, and they don't, including ours, which don't often reflect, as best as we possibly can, the nature of the activity that we've invested in. So the point you've made, I appreciate, and we'll certainly take those comments on board.
Leslie Crane.
Minister, you referred to earlier the monitoring rounds, and in fact, June hasn't really happened. Things have been carried on now. It's looking like December now. How do you tend to manage your budget in the last 3 months of a financial year?
Well, I have excellent officials working in my department who have got skills and expertise that have guided me through this last floor.
Can they produce money? That's my point.
No, they can't grow money, Leslie, not yet. They can do most other things.
They could.
And I'm sure they wish. I'm sure they wish they could. But certainly we have spent the summer, and I have spent the summer in particular at my desk working very hard in preparation in the event of scenarios around budgets, and we are certainly facing a very difficult situation, and it isn't just me.
No, the arm's length bodies are in the very same boat.
Arm's length bodies are in the very same boat, not just for my department. Other departments are in this position, as are their arm's length bodies. And for the members of the parties, and well, for the executive members who are there now, they will begin in to try and ensure that the budget they have meets not only the gaps, but try and make projections and sustainability for the future. And that's something that's focused all our minds.
The capital element would be virtually meaningless then?
No, it won't be, because there are contractual commitments that have already been made that will carry on.
Some of them are ring-fenced.
So, well, yes, they are, because, you know, for example, on the Stadia programme, that's ring-fenced commitments that have been made.
The other point, Minister, then going on from that, just to cheer you up a little bit more, the comprehensive spending round now is imminent.
It is.
It's not looking good. Have you any detail on that?
I don't have any detail at all on it, other than there, again, and it's not to be repetitive, we are facing Tory austerity that is particularly frightening. We are facing an austerity and a cut and attack to our public services that is going to have a huge impact on all the citizens across the board. We had hundreds of millions of pounds taken off our budget in 2011 after we all agreed a programme for government. We have an indication this summer that more of the same and then some will be removed of our block grant again. And I think that is completely unsustainable. And I think what we need to do collectively is to argue for a sustainable and workable budget for everyone. Now, how that budget's spent and how we prioritise it, that's for rooms like this. But I think we need to have a collegiate approach and standing up for our people and our citizens, regardless who they are and where they come from. Because unless we do, the Tories will do what they do best. They'll pick us all off and divide and conquer. And that's not something that I'm happy to stand by and watch.
Well, in the absence of any agreement here, of course, that situation is not sustainable either. And, you know, when the penalties alone were 200 million down.
Well, in fairness to yourself, Leslie, our parties are sticking through. We're coming back and facing the difficult decisions. We're getting involved in the discussions, as difficult as they are, and they are. We're dealing with really difficult issues, which are historical, but at least we're back at our desks and we're working away. We're not standing outside.
I've been at some of the talks, but I don't want to go in there.
I know you have.
Groundhog Day.
I know. I'm not agreeing that it has been Groundhog Day. I'm agreeing that I know that I've seen you there. But at the end of the day, the ministers who are at their desks are making difficult decisions under very difficult circumstances. And collectively, we're trying to do our best to get a budget that is workable and that can sustain our departments and our citizens, not just this year, next year, but for future years. And that, for me, is the challenge that we all need to meet.
But you accept if they don't do that, someone may well do it on our behalf?
Well, at least they're there doing it. They're not standing outside. They didn't walk away and leave the lights out, Leslie. So.
No, they're probably lights are going off because no money in the meter.
Well.
Yes. Okay. Minister, just earlier on, I think it was yourself or Dennis, but I think it was probably yourself mentioned that there were 13 briefings to the committee over a period of time about in relation to World Police and Fire Games.
I'll get to the detail.
Do we have details of those?
Certainly.
It's particularly, may have been briefings about World Police and Fire Games, but were there briefings that explained that this was a process in regard to what's called a programme, but was actually simply based on a business case rather than open applications? I think that's the concern that many people have. Secondly, just it also mentions, when I've asked about it, there was £200,000 down against a Belfast Cultural Festival, and then there's £200,000, which is apparently the same money which was down elsewhere against the cultural programme for this year. Since one element of that is rural, are we absolutely sure those are the same thing? Because there was the Tycullen element which was rural, or is it Belfast?
The £200,000 is referred to in the list of inescapable bids as the cultural programme. It is a failure.
So
£200,000 is
it's the cultural programme. It's been described as something else elsewhere.
It's been described elsewhere as the Belfast Cultural Programme, but it does include South Armagh.
Yes.
Greater Belfast, or it is strange. I have to say, I cannot understand, I don't think many people can, how it is that Failure are able to pick one organisation from the whole of rural Northern Ireland, where there are hundreds and hundreds of cultural groups, and the only group that it picks is the one in South Armagh. Is that the one that also has an IRA, provisional IRA memorial in the grounds? Is
You
it the
asking
same
me
centre?
that question?
I'm not from there. I would know. Just I'm only going on what's in writing.
Chair,
Is it the same?
your family's from that area?
I don't think they're from Maltbond.
Not too far away. Not too.
But is
far
it?
away.
But maybe we just ask the question: Is that the one that has the Provincial IRA Memorial in the grounds?
What has that got to do, Art?
I'm just asking so we know. Because
You have checked other people here today.
I will just ask. I'm just asking a question. Yes or no?
Sorry, I'm not aware of the relevance of the question, but certainly what we'll do is we'll try and find out exactly where the memorial is, and we'll provide you the details of it.
There is a memorial then. That's okay.
There's a memorial in Mullabon, but I'm not too sure it belongs to T. Cullen.
Well, it was.
And that's what you asked. Just to be clear, that is what you asked, isn't it?
It is indeed.
It is,
and
yes.
the ground may have been transferred to somebody else, but it's just beside the centre.
Well, in your former role, you transferred ground quite a lot to groups for memorials, so you'd be well aware of that.
Thank you indeed for the. That's been helpful. It's disappointing that we find ourselves in a situation where arts organisations are being hit so viciously, and I have to say the cuts are so serious. The damage to the cultural centre, and some of the damage in the past was undoubtedly Tory austerity. There's no doubt about that, no question about that. Everybody acknowledges that. Where there's a disagreement and a difference of opinion clearly is that these new round of cuts are essentially a reallocation of money from one area of the arts to another. That's the issue.
Well,
thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the questions. And there's certainly some details that we definitely need to follow up on. I accept some of the points that you made, certainly in terms of presentation. I think from what we have been brought to our attention today, we need to go and refine those. And just in closing, I believe I'm back again on the 17th. Hopefully have those amendments made for that committee appearance. But one thing I would like to take exception to, you mentioned that I'm siphoning off funds, and I think that's disgraceful. I'm glad you agreed that there's Tory austerity. I'd love some of the money that they're spending on Trident to be invested in the arts. Even if I had a fifth of a percentage of that, I think our sector would be a much better
The
place.
Culture Arts and Leisure Committee has a wide remit, but it doesn't include Trident.
No, and I'm glad it doesn't, because the thoughts of some of you people near Buttons is actually very scary. Good afternoon.
Sorry, can I just ask the Minister before she goes, and I missed it out in my questions, it was just the RPA and the experienced staff that's going to be lost through voluntary redundancy to the arts. Maybe if they could come up with, you talked about maybe the job losses because of funding and the cuts to the budget.
I didn't talk about job losses to funding.
Well, sorry, the Arts Council did. Maybe if the Minister could look just to see where your department and what role they could play in the rollout of RPA, and then with the budget cuts that have come.
Okay, I'll try and get that detail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you again on the 17th then. Thank you.
Just for the record, Chairman, I have no experience whatsoever of armaments. None. Not yet.
What was that? It's not a John Ashford. There's somewhere right here.
The 17th.
Where are we now? Manager isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Or somewhere.
I hate this. I'm here.
No, just then to be honest now. Or do we want to-
We have asked for additional information on a number of things in regard to the briefings to the committee, the 13 briefings in the past. They're going to look at the way that information is recorded. I think also all of us will want to look at the recording of the meeting because there were a number of points that were made in the presentation, both particularly actually by, not so much by Patricia, but by the others that we think we'll want to look at just exactly what was said and just reflect on it. And I think we will have a need to return to that because there were a number of statements made which I think might well be questionable. We will return to this again. Okay, thank you. We're now on the matters arising.
Do you want to defer? Get permission to defer just due to time.
Okay, due to time, we're going to defer a number of items, which are
All matters arising.
We do all matters, Chair. If we defer
Leave
all
matters
matters
arising,
arising
that's fair
and
enough.
all correspondence apart from Jonathan has a hard copy to table. Chair, if I can just explain what that is. We've received correspondence from the Committee for Finance and Personnel, which Jonathan is just handing round now. This refers to a legislative consent motion on a proposed cap on public sector exit payments, and the Finance and Personnel Committee have laid a memorandum in the Assembly in connection with the Enterprise Bill currently making its way through Westminster. The Finance and Personnel Committee are holding evidence sessions regarding this and have agreed to forward information regarding what evidence has been gathered to all statutory committees for their information. So we just wanted members to have that in hard copy, and we're asking them to note it. Okay, because it's contemporaneous.
Chairperson's business.
Is the cap for any individual payout, or is the cap in the total amount of funding that's available, or are we restricting numbers or restricting level?
Chair, we have no specifics on that. I think maybe the Finance Committee, possibly those who sit on it, might have a better idea.
Well, can we not ask and find,
There is a link there, Basil. It's all on the link.
Yeah, I pressed it, Leslie, but nothing's happened.
We can issue it electronically.
You did it wrong. I don't do it wrong. Can you say we
can issue that electronically so you can access the link. We do that.
Yeah. Chairperson's business then, referring members to the invite at page 169 from BBC NI regarding the preview screening of Mary McAleese and Colin Balance taking place this evening in the Blackstaff studio. Issued to all members. If anyone's available to attend, let us know. Point 8.2, referring members to the SILIP programme at page 170 for the event which is being hosted by the CAL Committee on the 2nd of December, room 115. It's a committee event and all members are encouraged to come along. There's also today the Linen Library Readathon event. It's on all day. Members are encouraged to attend for 15 minutes to read something to help support the library. A donation will then be passed on to them by yourself after you've read. And forward work programme.
Are you going to make a donation?
I will.
Good.
Forward work programme, point 9.
Your book yet that you're going to read?
No.
William.
That could be a surprise.
Colour on too.
Point 9.1, referring members to the forward work programme, page 172, Clark.
Just to remind members that we are down at the MAC next week, and we're meeting we hope as many of the 32 organisations that have received a cut from the Arts Council as possible. We will send further information to members on that, but it'll be same timing as a meeting, 10 a.m. start, probably finishing around 12:15, 12:30.
Sorry, can I ask just on the MAC, and there's some fault with the building or some, and they're talking about £1 million repair bill and all of that. In the correspondence we received today, they were talking about the legal fees. That's going to be required to maybe be covered, and should that not be covered by for the fixing of that for the original building insurance?
I think that's what was being highlighted. That's the legal issue that's being looked at now. It's just exactly who is liable for it.
They are confident.
I hope it's better result than what we got for the windows in.
Chair, members may recall we did ask for a research paper on this, and we do have that now. It's really a matter of scheduling it.
Okay.
The other one I wanted to highlight is an additional meeting that we sent out an email for the other day, and the Minister referred to 17th, Tuesday the 17th of November in the Senate Chamber, 12:30, to deal with the BBC Charter renewal, which was deferred from today. So that's an hour-long meeting in the Senate Chamber this Tuesday the 17th at 12:30.
Yeah. Any other business?
Just one thing, Chair. For 5 years now, it's hard to believe, I've been sponsoring the Ellen Piping extravaganza here, and it's grown greatly over those 5 years. As a result, this year, I said to me, look, you're on the Culture, Arts and Leisure Committee. If we can do something for the committee, I'll be very pleased to do that. A cultural experience. Could be some lunchtime thing that we do.
Members who are able?
Yes.
Right.
We'll look at that, Chair.
Fine.
Thank you.
Date and time next meeting, next Thursday at the Lab in the MAC Theatre, the 32 arts sector organisations.
Right.
And the next meeting then Tuesday, as mentioned, in the Senate Chamber. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.